In 2001, the wrestling world was stunned when the Monday Night Wars came to an abrupt end and Vince McMahon purchased World Championship Wrestling. The wrestling wars that began in the 80s were over, and there was only one company left. If there was any good that could come from this monopoly, it was that we'd finally get to see what we'd waited for all these years. WWF versus WCW. It should have been the biggest wrestling storyline ever in the business. A can't-miss promotion that would have kept business strong for years to come. All those what-ifs would finally be answered. All those dream matches would finally happen. No, they wouldn't. Instead of being remembered for years as one of the greatest events in wrestling, the WCW invasion is remembered for being one of the greatest wasted opportunities of all time. Today we sit with our guest booker, Jim Cornette, one of the most respected minds in professional wrestling. We will go over what went wrong with the angle in the first place, and then we'll rewrite history and have Jim rebook the invasion angle. Will it be better than what actually happened? How could it not be? Let's find out now as we present guest booker with Jim Cornette, rebooking the WCW invasion. In talking about the WCW invasion and all the things that went wrong and could have been done differently and salvaged potentially one of the biggest blown opportunities in the world of wrestling, we thought we'd get somebody who we would have to pry that information out of and really just kind of coax to express how he feels about that and what he would have done differently. So we called this guy, and he reluctantly agreed to come up here, hoping that he'd have some kind of opinion on booking.
I don't really.
We'll see what happens.
I just kind of go with the flow.
Yeah. We'll talk a little bit, and if you want to expand, you expand.
Yeah.
We'll be here tomorrow. Jim Cornette. Everybody knows that. Let's start with booking. The series is intended to chronicle the minds of all the living bookers while they're
Are you? Wait a minute.
while they're with us.
Wait a minute. Either I'm dead or my watch has stopped. I don't know.
So I want to get inside your head a little bit with booking philosophy. When do you think you became a seasoned booker? What had to happen? What did you have to live through? What did you have to do?
I became a seasoned booker next month. You'd never become a seasoned booker. You become an experienced booker, but there's always I always tell people that in the transition, which we'll talk about, from wrestling booking to wrestling writing means it's overproduced, overscripted, overcontrolled, micromanaged, homogenized, sanitized, pasteurized, the little cellophane wrapper on the toilet seat at the Super 8, it's sanitized for your protection. With wrestling booking, basically somebody has to have an eye for talent and a knowledge of what the matches are supposed to look like and maybe what the fans might want to see, and you take some interesting, unique, and charismatic personalities. You bring them into your territory. You put them in a position where you can expose them to the public and get them over where the people are interested in them, whether they are predisposed to like them or to hate them. And then you manipulate them into a personal situation or a quest for a championship where they're going to fight each other and you sell tickets to it. That's harder than writing. You put a chimpanzee in front of a typewriter and give him an infinite amount of time and paper, and sooner or later he's got a Pulitzer Prize winner. But a chimpanzee cannot book because you have to deal with personalities. And that's what's been lost in the transition to wrestling writing, is now everything sounds the same and everybody talks the same. And I always say, Stephanie McMahon, I never had a crossword with her. She's a nice girl, but she was the boss's daughter. And her main qualification for booking is that she's the boss's daughter. She couldn't book Lassie in a pet shop. But people think you got a degree in creative writing and you have written television that entitles you to be able to write wrestling. Well, you can write wrestling, but you can't book wrestling.
Where did we lose that? When was the emphasis put on writing over booking?
When corporate America took over, the TBS buyout, they didn't know what they were doing. Then the territories went by the wayside, and when there was a strong territory in almost every part of the country, the promoter took care of his business in his territory. And all of the promoters together took care of their business all across the country, and you didn't let people reinvent the wheel or fix what wasn't broke or whatever, tired cliche you want to use. And then all of a sudden, everybody got involved. and everybody can be a promoter, and everybody can be a booker or a writer, and everybody can be a wrestler practically anymore. And all of a sudden, it got very, very watered down to where, and then, television took over, and you have to serve the demands of television and pay-per-view and networks, and it's just, wrestling got too big for its own good. And at the same time, it constricted and got real small.
You were a wrestling fan growing up. When did you first become aware that there was a booker pulling the strings, that there was a master of puppets behind what you were seeing?
Probably about a week before I actually made my debut on television. No, I'm not kidding with you. I became a wrestling fan when I was 9, and I started as a photographer and teenage ring announcer, gopher boy for Christine Jarrett when I was 14, and did that for 6 years. Magazines and programs and announcing it, etc., and anything that I could do, going poster in a town or a time or two for Christine Jarrett. And I guess the first time I ever heard the phrase high spot, I was in the locker room at Channel 5 TV for my first week of Memphis television. After 6 years, I very seldom was allowed in the locker room. The business was protected. There was no internet. There was no way to I found out about the Blade when I was at ringside taking pictures, and I thought Jimmy Valiant, at first I thought he sharpened his thumbnail. I'm like, oh my God. And then, slowly these things, if you observe, and I tried to study the matches. I mean, I would anticipate the bumps so I could shoot them. And you were around long enough. I picked up Carney just by having guys talk Carney in front of me so they wouldn't smarten me up. But you really didn't understand that, and that's what made it so much easier to get into wrestling and become a good talent. Because you didn't have a clue shit from Shinola about how this was done or what was done until you learned it the right way when they allowed you in. When they allowed you in and the veterans told you, this is what we do, this is how we do it, more complicated than that, but you know what I'm saying, over a period of time, you learn the right way. But now that every putz with an internet can the Blade and the Kayfabe and Mark and Angle and all this stuff and so-and-so's dropping the belt, they figure out what they think wrestling is, and they generally think it's a display of moves, and then it's harder to untrain somebody that's learned the wrong way and then train them the right way than it is to train them the right way from scratch.
Would you say that the biggest thing that's absent today, other than the process is different, but there's no drama, it sounds like? Is that where you're going?
No, there's plenty of drama. There's too much drama. Generally, the drama's in the locker room or in the office instead of on television. Look, I'm sorry. It's just, see, I've had this beautiful girl all night long beating on my door. Finally, at 4 o'clock this morning, I got up and let her out. But anyway, the thing is, there's drama. What there isn't is there's not emotion. Mm-hmm. The people, when believability and credibility was lost in professional wrestling in order to open it up to become mainstream entertainment, in my opinion, the emotion that it could engender from the fans was lost, because I've had over 100 people in my career go to jail willingly by taking a swing at me or connecting in front of a cop.
Right.
Just to get... say what you want. People, you say, nobody ever believed wrestling was real. If you will go to jail just to take a swing at the bad guy wrestling manager or punch him out or whatever, if you will go to jail, knowing you're going to jail, you're doing it in front of a cop. I don't care. You believed something. They believed I was a prick, in some fashion. So that kind of emotion, the heat that the heels had, and conversely, the admiration, adulation, love that the baby faces had, because they were the ones that were trying to vanquish those evil heels. That emotion is gone. People are not going to make that kind of emotional investment in what they know to be a choreographed performance.
Right.
So that's, the ticket prices are bigger and the dolls are in Walmart, but you don't have heat and you don't have 10,000 people in the Mid-South Coliseum every Monday night or Charlotte Coliseum or whatever, repeatedly over and over until Dusty finally wins, the Rock and Roll finally wins, Jerry Lawler finally wins. You could run the same match in a town 13 weeks in a row until a babyface won. Now it's, okay, we saw that one, we'll wait until they do something
right,
different.
Yeah. Okay, so who are some of the bookers that influenced you?
Well, like I said, I grew up in the Memphis territory, and Jerry Jarrett was the promoter after Nick Goulas. Really, when I got involved in the business, Jerry was the promoter, and you always thought the promoter, made the matches. I didn't realize until I'd gotten, involved a little bit more, that there was somebody else. I mean, Jerry a lot of times was his own booker, and he was fabulous. He set the tone. Just like Bill Watts always employed a booker, but by the same token, it was his style of wrestling, what he thought that should be presented to the fans in his area. They're going to like this. We're going to educate them to buy this. This is the style we present. But Bill Dundee would book. Jerry Lawler would book Memphis. They'd trade back and forth. Jerry Jarrett would step in if he wanted to. The first time I really had a clue there was a booker was Robert Fuller was booking. And the Fullers owned the Knoxville territory, but he'd come over to Memphis, and he was the booker. And he brought over Professor Tanaka, Mr. Fuji, Gorgeous George Jr., Mongolian Stomper. Because, the booker would bring his own crew in of guys he liked to use. And business was not doing too well. And one week, all those guys were on the card, and the next week, none of those guys were on the card. And that's when I kind of figured, I think, yeah, okay, I'm starting to get a hold of that. But when I got into business and learned what was going on, obviously Jerry Jarrett, impressed me quite a bit. Just the way that he was able to be successful that early for that long in a territory with cities that small. Bill Dundee was a great finish man. He was a booker, but he once again, he didn't write, he manipulated. He put guys together that he knew could draw money, and then he gave them finishes that would lead to returns that would sell tickets. Then, of course, we went to Louisiana, Bill Watts. Even though Dundee was his booker at the time, Watts was, to me, it was a genius. And then he told me he learned from Eddie Graham, and it's like, what was that old Western where, well, I'm fast, but so-and-so's faster, and so-and-so's faster than him. There's always somebody better. So he learned from Eddie Graham, and Eddie Graham also taught Dusty Rhodes. And everybody that's talked about Eddie Graham would say, and I never got to work for him, but they would say, the epitome of what a booker was. He had the finishes and the mind, and he could see it coming. And I think Kevin Sullivan, speaks highly because he learned from Eddie Graham. So, those guys, they were successful. They were successful in more than one area. That's how you measure success, is when somebody's been successful either in more than one thing in wrestling or in more than one place in wrestling, to me.
Gotcha. We're going to deal with WCW.
I'd like to deal with WCW.
So take us back to Crockett's days, and take us backstage, behind the scenes, and tell us what that was like. How did that operation run? Was everything coming from Jim Crockett? How much freedom did Dusty and whoever was booking it, the Ole, whoever had it?
Well, actually, when I worked for Crockett, the only booker he ever had was Dusty.
Oh, really?
Because Dusty started, Starrcade was Dusty's concept. I think Dory Funk Jr. was booking at the time of the first Starrcade in '83, but it was Dusty's concept. When it got over so well, Dusty was booking in Florida at the time, but then I think Crockett brought him up maybe end of '84, somewhere around there, and he booked until Crockett sold to TBS. And with Dusty, once again, he was a big picture guy, and J.J. Dillon was his assistant, and J.J. was a detail guy. J.J. had handwriting for one thing that the boys could actually read. Dusty would he'd put the lineup up, it'd be people's initials, J.C. and D.C. versus F.U. and, M.O.U.S.E. But Dusty would obviously, he would lay out the television, and he would basically give it to JJ to fill in, and then he would lay it out for the talent. But see, once again, Dusty did not micromanage because he booked talent that he knew could draw money and sell tickets. So he wouldn't sit down with you and for 20 minutes drill into your head, you got to say this and this and this and this and this. He would say, okay, last time at Charlotte Coliseum, it was no disqualification, and Cornette, you rolled in, you whacked Ricky Morton with the rackets. This time they've asked for a cage. So go out there and talk about this time. Charlotte Coliseum, June the 24th, cage, midnight rock and roll is for the title. Sell me some tickets. And if I went out there and did a great promo and sold him some tickets, and he left me alone. If I went out there and did a shitty promo and nobody came, then he didn't bother me. He just scratched my name off the fucking sheet. He came up with finishes that he thought would draw for returns. He came up with matchups he thought people wanted to see, and that was the epitome of wrestling booking. And it's hard, and it's harder, really, than, like I said, than writing. And a lot of people knock Dusty for, well, he bankrupted Crockett. Jim, and as a matter of fact, in my new book, the Midnight Express and Jim Cornette 25th Anniversary Scrapbook, available at jimcornette.com. Shameless plugs. There's a lot of color in there, folks. It's really nice. Slick paper, feel that. But besides that, I go into a lot of stories about this, but I feel like the Home Shopping Network now. But it really was where the talent was allowed to be individuals. And, nobody could tell Dick Murdoch how to talk like Dick Murdoch, or Dusty, or Flair, or the Horseman, or, he had talent there working for him. And people blamed Dusty because, Crockett Promotions went broke. I tell a story, it wasn't Dusty that bankrupted Crockett Promotions, it was Crockett's accountant. He had the same office staff that he had when he was running North and South Carolina and Virginia, when he was running all over the country and buying promotions and buying airplanes. And they got in over their head, and they found out one day he was running a successful company, and the next morning he found out he was $2 million in the hole. The whole story is in there. It takes too long to tell. But
the move to Dallas didn't.
I defend Dusty. Well, they had a huge office out there because everybody said, if you want to be national, you've got to be in a big media market, right? I was just in Richmond, Virginia last night. I go in the Hampton Inn at 10:45, and the guy behind the counter is 38 years old. Midnight Express. Last month, I was in Greensboro, North Carolina for 2 nights at a Hampton Inn. Notice a pattern here. I got the card. And everybody there, it wasn't, you managed the WWF champion, or you were, you're on Spike TV now. It was Midnight Express, Jim Cornette. Because it's the Carolinas, it's Crockett country. Yeah. I mean, the night guy brought a tennis racket for me to sign the next night. I'm posing for pictures with the maids. They still remember it was that strong. I'm not saying I'm over that much. I'm saying anybody that was on Crockett Promotions television was over that much, and still is for the people old enough to have seen it, because wrestling was so it was on fire in the Carolinas. It was ingrained in their DNA. And
not only that, though, you had national reach through TBS. I had it up here in New York. So
and when we started branching out, to Philadelphia, Baltimore, etc., Philly and Baltimore, Chicago were all tremendous towns. There were really NWA strongholds. In a lot of cases, we would beat, in the 80s, the WWF with the Hulk Hogan thing, because some people liked rock and wrestling, and some people liked wrestling.
Mm-hmm. Some people like both, and that variety, giving them that opportunity to have both. I remember the first time you guys came up here was that I attended was '84. Was it Night of Champions at the Meadowlands? I don't know if you were
the Meadowlands. We were not
Steamboat
here yet.
Flair was the main
It was
event.
a famous show.
Yeah,
we
it
were
was
not.
great.
We were not here yet. We were soon to be, and we they got it started, and then we came in and went right down the toilet.
But let's talk about that divide between yesterday and today, and also maybe a little bit about Crockett and the Northeast. When you're an outspoken guy.
I'm quiet. I like to garden.
You don't play the politics very, very well. You let people know how you feel.
Well, I'm too old to put up with horseshit. At this point.
Were you any different 10 years, 15 years ago when you're in?
Yes, I was.
Really?
Because I worked for people who knew what the fuck they were doing. And they didn't drive me crazy. And it wasn't until, everything went to hell and all the territories went away that, either the WCW drove me crazy, WWF drove me crazy twice. Now I'm really actually happy and my blood pressure is down. But, for about 10 years there, from the early 90s to the early 2000s, I was convinced, probably foolishly so, that wrestling could be brought back, that it could be, that our business could be somehow resurrected. Lightning would strike, Eddie Graham would come back to life, people would forget about the internet, and everything would be as it was before. And then I realized, no, it ain't going to happen, and no matter what I do, and no matter how, crazy I get over it, it's not going to help. And so then I just say, okay, now I don't really care as much. But, it's gone. But at the time, actually, in the 90s, it was only 5, 6, 7 years from when everything was hot and buildings were drawing huge crowds and people were watching wrestling on television and a lot of guys were making a lot of money and nobody was, dropping over dead. Nobody had bad publicity. There wasn't all this horse shit there is now. And so it could reasonably have been assumed that, maybe we got off our path there for a little while, but we can come back. But now everybody knows everything. All our tools have been taken away. You can have the wrestling show, but wrestling as we knew it and as a mainstream attraction, I don't think is going to be able to come back.
You worked with, you were talking about the Crockett's. You were there when Dusty was booking. And Dusty would give you the pointers and give you the promo and allow kind of the natural magnetism of each individual character to kind of emanate and sell the tickets. The details were almost secondary because, goddamn, I got to see that person. And you do the work to find out where I can get my hands around his throat.
Yeah.
Now you're in WWE.
I'm going to say F a lot. Well, I'm going to say F a lot, but I'm going to say WWF a lot too.
You could
because
say the fuck word.
It flows better instead of WWF, and also years of habit.
Yeah, training. Yeah, but okay. So you've got that we were just talking about. Then you're up in WWF, and there's Ric Flair holding a script. How do you operate in an environment like that?
Well, actually, I was not there in WWF at the same time as Flair was, but
Foley,
still
take Foley, a good talker.
Well, and the thing is, Cactus is so good that there's some guys that are so good that even the script writers will not hand them they'll hand them a script, but they know what they're going to get back is that guy's version of that. But, excuse me, that's Bob Evans sausage gravy talking. But, so many guys now that don't have the experience doing television or that don't have the pull to say, I really don't think I'd say that, but I could say something better. They can't do that. They don't have the pull. So you see this mindless droning of these, it's like the deer caught in the headlights look, because I'm looking at the camera, but what I'm trying to do is recite what I have memorized from looking at a piece of paper with all the passion and emotion of a Stepford wife, while I tell you that I absolutely do not believe what I am saying is true, because somebody else has put the words in your mouth. Yep. Once again, difference between writing and booking. In booking, I take this really interesting character that people like, and I take this really interesting character who people think is a prick, and I give them a reason to fight, and I sell tickets for it. Mm-hmm. And I let them be themselves, because that's why people were interested in them in the first place. Right. And if a guy can't talk, you get him a manager.
Matchmaker versus creator.
And if the manager doesn't work, then you get a new guy. I mean, it's not that hard, but now it's. Also, there's the preposterous aspect. When you've got, we could go all day long with the things that I think that Vince McMahon and his minions have done to wrestling, but whether it be the necrophilia or the transvestite blowjob on Mark Henry or just the preposterosity, to coin a phrase, of any stupid shit. Wrestling operated on one basic principle. Don't do anything if it couldn't really possibly happen. It might be far-fetched. Jerry Jarrett was a master at it. No matter what kind of crazy, insane bullshit was going on, it actually was rooted in enough logic or something. You just thought, these are crazy people. Mm-hmm. You didn't think it's phony people doing this shit to get a rise out of us. You thought, these are crazy people. Mm-hmm. They're really crazy. And in most cases, they were. And crazy in a good way. Maybe not so much anymore. Crazy in a bad way. I don't know.
Let's create here an imaginary great booker. What do I have to throw in the stew?
Oh, geez. Insanity. Lots of black tar Mexican heroin. No. Once again, I think, and by the way, at JimCornette.com, as a matter of fact, the Cornette's commentary that's up as we speak, of course you won't see it now, but I'm sure it'll be archived, is my take on the difference between wrestling, writing, and booking. Boy, I'm going to plug this thing for all it's worth. A great booker, once again, can pick great talent. And a great booker knows what talent complements each other to work the magic in the ring and draw money out of it. And a great booker has restraint and knows when not to hotshot. Because in this business, every period of hotshotting in a particular territory has been followed by an equally long, if not longer, period of drought where business was down. Because once you do everything you can do, you numb and immune the people to your angles and your injuries or whatever, which is what the hardcore wrestling fad did, and I'm sure we'll get to that here in a little while also. But, it used to be, if a guy the heel took a roll of quarters and punched a guy in the mouth and the quarters flew and he went down, he came up, he's bleeding, my God, you can run for 3 months with that. I mean, a guy goes to the hospital, whatever, he gets stitched up. Now they see people fly through flaming furniture with thumbtacks and broken glass stacked on it with the AIDS-infected hypodermic needles ringing the, and then you go to break and come back and, well, here comes a midget match. oh well, can't grieve forever. It doesn't make any sense. What we've done is we have taken a business where grown men pretended to hurt each other but really didn't, and people believed that they were and paid to see it, and turned it into a business where grown men really do hurt each other and nobody believes they are, and fewer of them pay to see it.
Funny
Who's
thing.
the marks? Who's the marks?
You said something very funny. It's so true. One time, I don't know what event you were talking about. It might have been an indie show, actually, where somebody actually got hurt and by being tossed outside the ring. Didn't grab the rope, whatever, got hurt. And everybody stopped. The workers stopped. The ref stopped. And you said, why the fuck didn't you count him out of the ring? He's supposed to be hurt.
Yeah, because it wasn't the finish.
Right.
So they don't know what to do.
Yeah, but that's such a great commentary on today's...
Guys are going overtime on television, right? Or overtime at a house show. I was at a show the other night for an old friend of mine that's running Charlotte, and he asked me to come over and take a look, and the match and it looked like it was just going on forever. I mean, I had a birthday watching this match, right? And it was really, I'm not going to name any names because I don't want to embarrass anybody, but it was so bad it was hurting the fans' feelings. And so the promoter actually gets on the microphone and says, 2 minutes left in the match. And they realize, oh shit, he's telling us to hurry up. So instead of going home, instead of ending the match, what did they do? They went into the same series that they had planned when they sat back in the locker room. Because they had to get their shit in, even though the shit they got in so far was some pretty shitty shit. They had to get their shit in before they could just, small package, sunset flip, just get out of there, 1, 2, 3. But no, they go in this long who shot John bunch of bullshit, leading up to this spectacular finish. Fucking crickets chirping. I saw 3 fans bring back the tickets they bought last month. And because they didn't know how to do it any other way. They had, well, we talked about the fans weren't in on the meeting. They didn't know. They wouldn't have been offended. I don't think they'd have been offended if spontaneous combustion had happened. It all caught on fire, but that's a different story.
And they wouldn't have known what was to come because they hadn't seen it either. Well, real funny booking story with you before we conclude this chapter. I don't know what you were booking for at the time.
I don't know why
it might have been an
either.
indie thing.
You said what? I thought you said why I was booking.
No. You had the guys come up with a list in the locker room of all the creative finishes they've ever seen, and you had them do them all. And then you had a very funny finish. Where was that?
Yeah. Oh gosh. Oh my gosh. It was up here. It was up here in the Northeast.
Was it one of the Candido shows?
And I think it was, and it may have been my friends Devin Storm and Ace Darling, or it may have, I'm trying to think. It may have been on one of Dennis Corluzzo's shows. But basically, I remember it was a couple guys that really were pretty good at what they did. And I said, go out there and tear the house down, but do like 6 of the most cliched finishes that when wrestling fans see this happen, they know immediately that's the finish, but kick out at 2 and then small package. Boom, 1, 2, 3. And people went, wow, and it worked. I did in Ohio Valley Wrestling one time, we had a King of the Hill match type of thing, where 2 guys start. And the winner of that match, another guy jumps in the ring, he immediately wrestles him. The winner of that, another guy jumps in the ring, he immediately wrestles him. And it continues on. We did a whole television show. The match lasted almost 40 minutes on television. And the finish was Matt Morgan beating Mark Henry with a body slam. Mm-hmm. Because Matt Morgan's a 7-foot giant, and Mark Henry was 450 pounds, and nobody ever body slammed him. So we did a 40-minute match with all these twists and turns, and we had 2 baby faces wrestle each other, the mentor and the student beat the teacher, and then they shook hands, and then the heel comes in and fucks the young baby face, and blah, blah, blah. But we ended up a 40-minute match. The finish was a body slam, and the people threw the babies in the air. Because they understood it, they liked it, and the guys got it over. That was the meaning of developmental territory, let guys develop. So I let them go out there and get themselves over in their individual little segment in that match, and they got the match over that way. And people wanted to see more of it instead of less.
So let's paint the picture. 2001 WCW. Who's in charge of creative over there at the time?
I don't have a fucking clue.
And
well, no, and now before I give people the impression that I'm speaking of stuff that I don't know anything about, let me say I don't know anything about it because in 1999, July of 99, I moved back to Louisville, got out of Stanford, was paroled from the Titan Towers, and Briefly, it was my deal. I had been up there. I'd been on creative for a couple of years, and I was glad when I got the job. And I was glad when I got rid of it. And I'd worked in the television studio, which I loved doing color with Jim Ross doing play-by-play. I learned so much. I loved announcing with JR. Everybody liked our work inside the office, and the viewers, except for Kevin Dunn, the executive vice asshole. I mean, president of Titan, or WWE, whatever they're calling themselves these days, stay ahead of the law. We were too southern together, because they got that southern thing going on, because the whole world revolves around New York and Connecticut, and everybody else just follows suit, So they split us up, and I was working with the third-party promoters and scouting talent, and I really enjoyed that. But at the same time, I was living in Connecticut, and I was in jail in Baton Rouge one time. I enjoyed that just a little bit more than living in Connecticut. So they were training guys in a warehouse, and this, in the warehouse at the TV studio, Tom Pritchard was working out with Sean Stasiak was there, and Kurt Angle started out in the warehouse, and a bunch of guys that name some you'd know, some you wouldn't. But there was the sawdust fumes when they were building sets, and the guys that dubbed tapes would stop by. They'd be eating lunch and watching the guys work out, and it was just a cold, dry, feedbackless atmosphere. And every once in a while they'd do a spot show in Massachusetts. And I went to Jim Ross because I'd gone back home to Louisville and run into Danny Davis, my old friend, who I'd managed when I started in Memphis in '82, and he had opened up a wrestling school in Louisville that had become somewhat successful, to where that he started running house shows, little spot shows, and then he got a television on a low power station, and he was doing things on a shoestring, but he could train guys, and it was successful, and it was also in my hometown, and I knew it could be more successful. So I went to Jim Ross and I said, it's only a matter of time, because I've run through a number of things here that they have me doing, and for one reason or another, either, me and Vince Russo butted heads in the creative thing, and me and Kevin Dunn butted heads on the TV thing, and also, one of these days I'm going to prison because I live in Connecticut, and I'm going to flip. How about if I move back to Louisville and we start an official developmental territory? Because they've been sending guys to Memphis to work for Lawler, to work for Randy Hales, but they were only running 3 shows a week or so in the live TV, and there was no place for guys to go to school there. It wasn't full service. So anyway, I said I would go back to Louisville and work with Danny, and we would contract, because I bought a piece of OVW, quite frankly, because I wanted to promote wrestling in my hometown and live there. And we contracted with the WWE to serve as a developmental program. We would take guys and we would give them experience on live events and on doing television, and also a school where they could actually train. And, that way we could restock the shelves, because when the territories went away, the training ground went away. And you had inexperienced talent. Guys were getting hurt. Guys weren't ready for prime time, whatever the case. Let's start this now, because in 5 years, we're really going to need it. That's what I said in 1999. Well, we started it, and with Jim Ross, who understood wrestling and who understood how to relate. I'll tell you a story Bill Watts told me that illustrates how Jim Ross would work with you. Bill Watts said that Vince McMahon Sr., back in the 70s, 80s, if he wanted, say, Bill Watts' top heel was Waldo Von Erich. If he wanted Waldo Von Erich, Vince Sr. was going to get Waldo Von Erich, because the Northeast, Madison Square Garden, he could pay guys more money than they would make in most other territories. So if he wanted a guy was going to go. But at the same time, he didn't just rape every territory of talent. Wish his son would have followed suit. What he would do is he'd call Bill Watts. He'd say, Bill, I really need Waldo starting TV on September 20th. Can you make him available for me? Well, of course, Vince, I'd be glad to. Thank you, Bill. I'll give you an extra week of dates on Andre.
Andre, right, sure.
And then there's a week of sellouts in the territory. So it was, you worked together. Jim Ross understood that we were running our own business, and that we had to sell tickets, and we had to make some money to pay the bills and keep the thing going, so that we could contract to WWEF for this training service and develop these guys. So he would give us a few weeks' notice if somebody was going to be called up, or if somebody was going to start going on the road, or if somebody was being sent down that we need to take a look at. He had his shit together. It was very easy to book talent with Jim Ross, because if Jim Ross said that somebody was going to be there, they were there. Even if the WWE had to go to expense to get out of something that they had gotten into because they'd promised, they'd given their word. We ran between summer of 2000 and summer of 2001, 3 shows at the Louisville Gardens that drew a combined over 11,000 fans paid and over $150,000 at the gate. We partnered with Clear Channel Radio. We had sponsors. The sellout, the Christmas Chaos Show 2001, which was actually the show so nice we had to promote it twice. We had a date booked December 13th, 2000. Snowstorm came. Nobody could get there. We postponed it till January 31st, same card, and still sold out. Everybody kept their tickets. Nobody got refunds. More people came. Anyway, we paid Steve Austin $25,000 to come down and do a live interview with Jim Ross. And Kane was the main event against the Leviathan, who was Batista, because we trained in that period of time, Batista, Randy Orton, John Cena, etc. We were a successful local promotion. We weren't going to get any bigger, didn't want to get any bigger. We wanted to do just what we were doing and get our sponsors locally and draw houses. So Jim Ross would book these guys and we would pay them well to come down. And then also it was a place where Jim Ross could say, you need to lose weight, or you just got out of the hospital from surgery, you need to get back in shape, or you need to get your wind back, or we need to take a look at you. Then they'd come to Louisville and work for us for free because it was helping OVW, but it was also helping the WWE, and it was helping the guy that came down and did that.
And they'd stay on the payroll in Connecticut.
They would stay on the payroll. They were paying them, but we paid guys when we featured them and made money off of them, or when we were providing the service that we contracted to with the WWE, they were sent down to work for us, and they were paying them. But we worked together. There was all kinds of different ways you could do things. When JR started slowing down and deciding to move back to Oklahoma, and they started grooming, like grooming a werewolf, to groom John Laurinaitis for JR's spot. He couldn't hold his jock, so now he's walking in his shoes. Laurinaitis didn't know what the fuck he was doing. I'm sorry, John, you know you're a complete fucking idiot, and you're a liar. He would... Then we started... the thing is...
Does anyone like him?
No, not in the world. No,
I haven't met anyone.
His own mother slapped the stork that delivered him. They would take guys and they would fire them out from under us. They'd be working for us. We'd have championship belts on them, and one day they wouldn't show up, and we'd get a call from the office. Oh, we had to let them go. Well, are they going to come back to finish up? Oh no! Once we fire them, we give them their notice. We don't let them work anymore because if they get hurt, then we got to pay them until they're well because we can't fire people that are injured. So they wouldn't even give us the call saying, hey, you better, wind so-and-so up because he might not be around too long. They'd just fire people and we'd never see them again. Or they would send guys to us. They'd call us up on Tuesday. Yeah, we're sending so-and-so tomorrow for television. We need you to use them on TV. I can't. TV's written. Well, stick them in. I can't stick them in. I've had the fucking show written. I do this myself. What do you think? We got a fucking crew down here that re-racks all this shit on spur of the moment notice. Why didn't you call me 2 weeks ago? They didn't know 2 weeks ago because they didn't have their shit together. Or one time we were promoting a show at Six Flags Kentucky Kingdom with Randy Orton, who we had on paper from John Laurinaitis, was supposed to be there on that date. And Tommy Dreamer calls us and says, well, he ain't going to be there. He bought a non-refundable vacation for his family. Well, why did he do that? Well, I don't think John ever told him. Then Laurinaitis says, oh, no, it was Dreamer. Dreamer didn't tell him. Dreamer says, no, that's bullshit. Laurinaitis is the one that was supposed to tell him because Laurinaitis is the head of this fucking bowl of fruits and nuts. You didn't know who to believe. You just pretty well knew not to believe John Laurinaitis. And I'll tell you a story. One time, Doug Basham. Here's another guy that they fucked and mind raped and ran out of the business that could have been a great talent. He looked great. His physique was tremendous. He was an old-time worker. He could talk. He was really getting it. He had 7 years experience in the business. I'm using him as my top heel. Danny Davis's nephew. And so he was Danny's first student, and Danny had really taken care. I'm not saying nepotism. I'm saying Danny really took care training him because he was family, and he was good. He was real good. He's my top heel. He's got long hair, and he's cocky, and he's wearing the black leather pants. He's ripped, and he's great, right? He walks in TV one night. He's bald-headed. He looked like a 40-year-old truck driver. I said, well, what the fuck did you do? He said, well, I was at, they had me come to Raw, and Creative wanted to see what I looked like bald. I said, they can't just fucking pretend. So I get on the phone, I call Laurinaitis. Of course, his voicemail is John Laurinaitis. It's Jim Cornette. My top heel just walked into fucking television, looks like a 40-year-old truck driver. Would you please tell this alleged creative team that if they can't fucking pretend or imagine what a guy looks like bald, give me 2 weeks notice, I'll book him in a hair match, I'll shave it, and I'll sell some tickets. Thank you, fuck you, bye. Boom. It was constant. It was, they slapped us in the face. They disrespected us. We had trained close to 100 people who made the full-time roster, guys and girls to some extent, either started in OVW, were signed, I mean, we found them and then they signed them after we trained them, or they were signed by WWF and sent down there and we trained them, or they were already in the business but they spent some time getting polished before they went there. No other developmental program that they ever had lasted a year. No other developmental program they ever had did anything but leech off, and I tell a lie, leech, except for Les Thatcher in Cincinnati. Everybody else leeched off of them, took their money, never made any money of their own, never had a real promotion Pinocchio, and never produced any talent. But yet there we were, and they're going, ding. They used us like a storage closet. They sent us rings we didn't ask for because they wanted us to have WWF rings, including the WWF ropes, which are real ropes. We said, no, somebody's going to get hurt. We use cables because we use the ring in the gym every day. We'll send you extra ropes. So immediately, within 2 weeks, I think it was Mark Henry. Of course, he's so heavy. He hits the ropes, they break, he hurts himself. 3 guys got hurt on the WWF equipment that they had to have because we couldn't just use cables instead of ropes. They were telling us what brand of Snapple to sell in the concession stand. Oh, don't do business with this guy. We're mad at him. Well, I'm not. He wants to give me money. That don't make me mad. Well, don't do business with him. Are you going to give me the money he was? Oh, we can't do that. He asked for more money. They'd squeal like a pig under a gate.
So you were just
people think. Wait a minute. Hold on.
God damn it. Go ahead.
People think that the WWE owned OVW or started OVW or purchased OVW or paid all our bills. I figured it out one time. At the time that I figured it out, they accounted for 30% of our annual operating revenue, not counting profit, just annual operating revenue, because we sold merchandise. We had sponsors. We ran 120 live events in the course of 1 year, not in front of tons of people, some of them, but counting the church gyms and the flea markets, we had our guys out in front of people. We ran the Louisville Gardens, we ran Six Flags Kentucky Kingdom, we ran St. Teresa's Gym in front of 62 people. But we were running the shows. We had a television show that was not bumped, preempted, or fucked with by our full cable coverage broadcast affiliate CW network station in Louisville from May 2000 to May 2008. Saturday night at 11 p.m., never been touched. We were doing 2-hour primetime specials on Saturday night leading up to our Louisville Gardens events or for our anniversary shows. We had a real company and we wanted some respect. Give us notice when you're taking somebody, give us notice when you're sending somebody, and leave us the fuck alone to what kind of equipment we want to use, because obviously we're doing a good job. And John Laurinaitis is a fucking moron and he couldn't leave well enough alone. And for the last year that I had a relationship with him, like this, I'd call up and yell. He'd call up, Jim, you can't do that. It's a publicly traded company. My response would be, we're not even a privately traded company. We're trying to make some money down here. Leave us fuck alone. I yelled at the guy and called him a stupid son of a bitch because he's fucking with my business. Well, you hurt his feelings. He shouldn't have such soft fucking feelings. He's in the wrestling business. And on it went. Until finally, boom, 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 we agreed not to speak to each other anymore, ever, for the rest of our lives. Now that I got that out of my system, well, I said the question was, hold on, let me tell you.
Something about WCW, I don't know.
No, the question was, yeah.
I wanted to know what the creative was.
Well, wait a minute. In developmental, there was a question down here. Was it a hassle being a booker in a developmental territory? No, box of fluffy ducks. So anyway, when I went down to Louisville, I would watch Raw on Monday nights because here's my week. Friday and Saturday were spot shows. Sunday and Monday were my TV writing days, and I wrote everything. I wrote the formats, then I polished the formats, then I wrote the formats down to send to Danny so he could copy them for the talent. I wrote the voiceover copy for our freaking commercials, which I then did the voice. That's why my voice is gone. I was screaming for 6 years straight. I wrote everything. Danny did all the production. I did all the creative. I was the announcer. Danny was the director, producer. He played the music and timed the show and posted it. I would view the videotapes and log, tell him what to put in, blah, blah, blah. 2-man team. So Friday and Saturday spot shows, Sunday and Monday writing, Tuesday our church gym practice show in 2001, Wednesday was our TV taping, Thursday was my non-wrestling day. Didn't look at wrestling, didn't talk about wrestling, didn't think about wrestling, so I never saw SmackDown. Additionally, July 2001, I finally, after having it for over a year, decided that I could finally take 3 weeks off after our big garden show to have the fun and excitement of having my hernia fixed. 18 surgical staples right there across my crotch. And so I was pilled up for much of July 2001 and don't really remember. But Bruce Pritchard was there. That was right about the time that they started putting ads in the trade papers and hiring writers. People that had experience in real television, which is what they think they are up there. They refuse to admit they're wrestling. They think they're action adventure, longest running act, like they're fucking Gunsmoke. When's the last time Marshall Dillon ever pulled a chain out of his fucking pocket and hit the fucking outlaw bad guy? Or they think they're I Love Lucy. Hey, Vince, you got a lot of splaining to do. They're not real television. They're fucking wrestling. And I would be proud of being wrestling at that level, but they're not, so they think they're TV. So they hire these writers with their college degrees that have written, especially comedy shows. You know, sports entertainment has to be funny. I would teach the guys, funny, don't draw money. Be serious, respect your business. And then they'd go up there and they'd dress like women and slather themselves with oil and put G-strings on and get blowjobs from transvestites. Anyway, so there was people on the creative team. Stephanie was in charge probably about that point. I don't know who the fuck they were. And
okay.
The writers would come down once a year to view. Here's the thing. Oh, let me tell you something else. While I'm on the subject, the writers would come down like once a year. And they would go to OVW. And that Brian Gerwitz fella, about this fucking tall, he once had a screaming fight with Paul Heyman, and people were actually betting on the outcome. So you can tell how tough Gerwitz might be. He couldn't whip cream with an outboard motor. They come down and they watch the guys work out, and then they watch the guys do promos. Me and Danny Davis are sitting there. It's Danny the trainer, it's me the booker. They don't ask, is this guy better babyface? Is he a better heel? What's his strengths? What's his weaknesses? How much experience does he have? Is he coachable? You know, what's his attitude like? They just look at the gimmicks. What kind of funny suit can he fit? And I was telling Danny this afterward. He said, well, I don't really think they know what kind of questions to ask. They had never seen wrestling training before. They had never seen guys working out before. Some of them had never seen wrestling matches before. They just get a job because they have TV experience. So anyway, Matt Morgan, 7-foot giant, 320 pounds, natural, can pass the test, believe it or not. 3.8 grade average in college. Incredible athlete, can talk, cut a promo. They fucked with his head and put him through so many silly fucking things. But finally they let him go. They bring him up once, they make him partners with Big Show, the only human in the world bigger than him. Then they sent him back to developmental. Then they fucked with him down there too. He's my top baby face. They said, switch him heel. I want to see him heel. What am I going to have him do? Kill Bambi's mother? How am I going to switch my most popular guy? Okay, so I figure out a way to do it. Then he becomes my top heel. He said, put a mask on him. Let's see if it improves his body language. What? Wow. Put a mask on him, then it kills him off. Once it kills him off, nobody cares about him anymore. Then they bring him up there. Then they made him a stutterer. Remember that? The stuttering goof, Matt Morgan? The guy is the blueprint of the perfect athlete and can cut a great promo, 7 feet tall, youngest giant in business. They make him a stutterer. Well, see, the thing is, he looks perfect, but then you find out he has an imperfection. Well, fuck, that's the kind of shit I usually take back to the mall and get my money back on. But anyway, I digress. They let him go. They told him, well, creative just doesn't have anything for you. He tells this story to my best friend, Kenny Bolin. Kenny Bolin sums it up. Never worked for the WWF in his life. Summed it up in one sentence. Fire the fucking writers! When would Bill Watts or Jim Crockett or Eddie Graham or Vern Gagne or any great promoter in the history of wrestling employ a booker or a writer whose task it was to use his talent, and you're paying this fucking guy every week to work for your company, but then the booker would come up and say, I just don't have anything for him. Hey, no problem. Hey, let me help you with your bag. Get it in the car. Pat you on the back. It's been nice having you. They keep the writers, they fire the fucking talent. Talent is what sells tickets in this business. But the writers think that they're more important than the fucking talent. So they don't have anything for them. Fire the fucking writers. But you can't fire the writers. Because you can't fire your daughter.
Well, I was going to say that. But now Vince is...
Apparently
again, we digress together.
We digress together.
But and he's a guy who's had the business in his blood and in his family forever, and here's a guy who was schooled properly on the product. Why is it happening?
I don't know. Trying to explain Vince McMahon would Sigmund Freud would jump out the window. At times you love Vince, at times you hate Vince, at times being around him you develop a twitch. Sometimes all three happen at the same time. But I haven't been around him since 1999, except the occasional visit here and there. I don't know what's happened. I know that he was always ashamed of being in the wrestling business because he would call it, at first he invented sports entertainment as a way to con the advertisers. You're not buying that low-class wrestling that you think that, everybody's toothless trailer park trash that watch. We're doing something new. That was to con the advertisers. That's fine. I'll work with you. But then everybody he's hired in the company since then, they tell them that, and now over 15, 20 years, they believe it. When's the last time that somebody, Bob Evans again. When's the last time somebody said to you, hey, did you see the sports entertainment matches on TV last night? Hey, did you get your sports entertainment tickets yet? Or there's sports entertainment at the Coliseum tonight? It's fucking wrestling. But wrestling in New York has always been somewhat clownish. It's always been cartoon. Had to be more serious down south. Smaller population, shows ran more often. Had to be serious, had to go on heat. In New York, it's all the Indians and the Cowboys and the fucking, Zabada and the fucking Fernham and whatever. And it was somewhat cartoony, but he took it to a whole new level because it became, instead of the Boston Celtics, it became the Harlem Globetrotters. It's still played with a basketball on a court. It's just completely different. And the Globetrotters don't play 71 home games or whatever. So, anyway, what were we talking about? Do you have any fucking idea?
The invasion.
Were we really?
Invasion.
Shit, I'd like to see that.
I'll get us back. What'd they do wrong?
Oh, Christ.
Good night. I'm leaving. Go ahead. What'd they do wrong? Go ahead.
I'll do the spit take. The king is dead. Everything. Everything. I mean, here, the key, you've got to understand, the key is, and I wasn't there, but I can hear him talking in his ear because I've gone through it. Kevin Dunn, when Mick Foley decided to do Cactus Jack, or they decided to let him, in Madison Square Garden for the first time. Cactus Jack had never been in the WWF, so Kevin Dunn was convinced that Mankind was a big star, but nobody knew who Cactus Jack was. Well, nobody's going to know who Cactus is. It's just Madison Square Garden. As soon as the music hit and he came out, the place blew because they were wrestling fans. Terry Funk, Chainsaw Charlie. When he comes out in Madison Square Garden, Kevin Dunn says, well, wait a minute, let me do Kevin Dunn. His teeth go down to here. Have you ever seen this fucking clown?
Yes, I have.
The fucking, he cuts his hair with a pencil sharpener, and he's got the buck teeth down here. He makes $500,000 a year or better these days. He can't have his fucking teeth fixed. And then everybody who has ever worked there in the television crew, or like I was talking to one of their old directors the other day, works for TNA, people who've worked on the crew, he'll get on the headsets, he's in the truck, he's the producer, and he's talking to the crew, or he's eating like chips with the teeth. So anyway, he said, Terry Funk hasn't been here in 15 years. Nobody's going to know. As soon as Terry comes out with the chainsaw and the fucking pantyhose on his head and starts doing that left kind of lopey walk around in a circle, Terry, they will tell Vince, well, Vince, you can't let these guys get over WWF guys because WWF guys are the real stars. These guys from down south, they've been on their TV. A few people may know them, but they're not stars like we have. The first thing about an invasion angle is, if the United States was invaded by fucking Swaziland or, Bogota, Colombia's, the fucking Bogota National Guard, are we shaken? No, if somebody's got nuclear weapons, they're going to hit the fucking button. We're thinking, oh shit, we got to hit them first. That's an invasion. What would happen if H.G. Wells' War of the Worlds, the Martians land, the fucking spaceship opens, and out pops Marvin the Martian with his cosmic ray gun? Get your invaders over. They won't let. They think Vince wants to hear, and secretly deep down he does. Nobody is as big as the WWF stars, so we can't let these guys look like they're competitive, or we can't let these guys beat WWF guys, or we can't do blah, blah, blah. And it just feeds on itself. And having the whole McMahon family thing. The whole reason why this would work, the whole reason why that Hall and Nash and the NWO invading WCW actually is the only angle they ever did in the 13 years they owned the company that actually really did kick Vince's ass, is because people really believe, my God, here's fucking Razor and Diesel, and they showed up, and they're going to fuck with the WCW guys. We believe this. That's why that worked. And he wasn't bright enough to see that. 5 years later, he gets the same thing handed to him double, because now he owns everything. He could use anything, any name, whatever. They blow it all off. And nobody's there telling him, Vince, what the fuck are you doing? They were probably telling him the reverse. Well, we don't want those NWA guys, you know, nobody believes that fucking shit. You know, those guys now, WWF stars, we know them all over the world. Hell. The McMahons owning everything, just more McMahon family, blah, blah. It should be a crime punishable by 3 to 5 years in the state penitentiary to let Shane or Stephanie on television just because everybody knows that it's like George Goulas with money. Everybody knows Daddy said sell. Everybody knows the only reason they're on television is because they're Vince's kids, because they didn't do it on their own merits. I like Shane. Not too sure about Stephanie, the way she's run through fucking talent over the last 10 years, running people crazy and driving them out of the business. But the point is, once that Shane owned one and Stephanie owned one and Vince had bought one, but now his family, and there's Linda out there, you know, what the fuck? It's WCW versus the WWF. We've been waiting for this for 20 fucking years. And this is what you give us? He hurt the fans' feelings. And if you noticed, just like WCW business dropped off at the end of '99 was it, and then they lost $60 million in 2000, and then they were done
by early 2001.
Middle of 2001, WWF business dropped. They made the bonehead mistake of turning Steve Austin heel. Yeah, everybody wants to boo their fucking hero, and they botched that, and business dropped. And what was it, a year and a half before it started percolating back up again? I mean, they were still making money. Nobody's throwing any benefits for them. I'm just saying, you know.
Why do you think that the biggest name talent wasn't brought aboard initially? Shouldn't that first surge, when you do that invasion angle, and that first surge, shouldn't you hit hard?
Sure.
First?
Well, it was money. See, WCW was losing more money than everybody realizes, because I'm not going to say all these people because I don't know, but when you had Flair and Goldberg and Sting and Nash, all the top guys, most of them were not being paid by WCW. They were being paid by Turner Broadcasting. When WCW was sold, folded up, caught on fire, turned blue, dropped dead, whatever, it didn't matter to them. Turner Broadcasting still had to pay these people. So if Goldberg is going to make $500,000 or what, I'm sorry if I'm shorting you, Goldberg, but whatever, you know, large amount of money, to sit at home and do nothing for a year and a half, why is he even going to take the same amount of money to go on the road and get beat up every weekend? He's not. But the thing is, it was penny wise and pound foolish. If you're going to buy this thing and just fold it up, get rid of it, get rid of your competition, fine, just do that. Don't take anybody. Because look what he ended up with. We'll talk about these names in a minute, but my God. You know, these guys, they were on 90-day outs. Every 90 days, he could say, go away, don't do this anymore. Didn't have to pay anybody anything. It was $75,000 a year, maybe $50,000 a year minimums. So he just, you know, went to the dollar store and bought him a bunch of wrestlers. Most of them he didn't even want. He just figured, well, I bought their company, put them out of business. I don't want all these guys to be unemployed. These other guys making all this money, they can afford to be. If he wanted to do the biggest angle of all time, or if his creative team wanted to do the biggest angle of all time, they should have said, okay, we bought WCW for what? Somebody said $2 million, somebody said $4 million. I didn't write the check, don't know for sure, but ridiculous fire sale price. Let's put it, we just spent $30 million on a fucking restaurant in Times Square, for fuck's sake. We spent $20 million trying to sell people bodybuilding pay-per-views. You know, we got 3 gay guys down at the Castro in San Francisco and a couple of fucking steroid manufacturers to watch a bodybuilding pay-per-view. We spent all this money on all these, the XFL, need I say more. They won't spend $5 million to buy the fucking top talent and do the biggest angle of all time, give them an easy schedule, work with them a little bit. Please. Anyway.
What do you think about the decision smashing the companies together instead of trying to operate 2 separate companies?
Well, with what they got, they had to smash it together. But of course, that wasn't going to work, and they should have known from the beginning. But there was nothing to sell, really.
Well, you got the final Nitro, which is March 26th. Okay,
The date that will live in infamy.
In scrutiny, because they wait until May.
In scrutiny, I spent a week there one time in scrutiny.
It's
really
nice.
Yeah.
You got to go on the off season though.
Yeah.
May 28th is when they start the invasion angle. That's 2 months.
Well, yeah, because they hadn't figured out what the fuck they were going to do.
That's what it was,
yet.
I guess.
Yeah,
Right?
they
needed
didn't
2 months
know.
to plan it.
Yeah, and they needed 2 months to plan that. I could have planned that on a good shit after a dinner at Taco Bell.
But not only that, you've known for how long that you're going to buy the company. Shouldn't you start to?
I don't really know that they knew all that long they were going to buy the company. They just kind of ended up with it. But still, fuck, you sent me this shit on Monday, hits Friday, and I've got something better than they had. It's not that fucking hard. It's not rocket surgery or brain science.
The first WCW match presented to the WWE audience was Buff Bagwell and versus Booker T. Scott Hudson and Arn Anderson doing the announcing. What's going on? What's going on?
No fucking clue. I mean, had those guys ever worked together before? Did it mean anything? The announce team had never worked together before. The two guys had never worked together before. I'm not knocking their ability, but it meant nothing. It wasn't Ric Flair versus Sting on the last Nitro. At least they had the farewell match or whatever the fuck. But I mean, there wasn't an invasion. Plus, by the way, here's a WCW match. They all work for us now. We own them. We can tell them what to do, and now we're going to have them here. They're trained monkeys, and we're going to pull the strings. How threatening was that to the life in WWF as we know it?
How would you have handled the ECW?
Oh, yes. God. Let me say this real. And by the way, I saw the ECW roster as of the time that they went out of business, and I can certainly understand why. I don't even know who some of the fucking people were. But no, ECW... Look, ECW had a lot of my friends work there and had a lot of great talent go through there. And ECW at that time was a shell of its former self, which as big as it ever got, it was seen by 1/10 of as many people in this country and a minute fraction around the world as WWF and WCW. And having an ECW invasion to me would only muddy the water. They went out of business, cherry pick your key talent, give them jobs, give them positions, one or the other. But to put ECW in there, if they hadn't have prolonged the agony of that, I knew when ECW started, I was in Knoxville, running Smoky Mountain. And I would hear what was going on, and Brian Hildebrand, Mark Curtis, a dear friend, had friends would send tapes and etc. We watch, and I said, they're beating the fuck out of each other for real. They're falling off the fucking roof. They're wrapping each other up in barbed wire. What the fuck are they doing up there? I knew it was not going to be good for the business, for the professional wrestling industry. I had no idea how right I was in that even though ECW presented Chris Benoit and Eddie Guerrero, it's always forever known, get the tables, chairs, ladders, fucking fire extinguishers, lights out, crucifixions, barbed wire, broken glass, the Rottens. Boy, they sure were too. This hardcore bullshit where suddenly, I like the business, as Dutch Mantell always says in his greatest line, I like the business a lot better when the marks were out front in the seats. All of a sudden, guys are beating the fuck out of each other for real in front of a bunch of people who know that everything they're doing is choreographed and they're cheering it because they're really hurting each other. What kind of fucking psychology is that? And they're doing it for practically no money. And they're also doing it just for the sake of being on television so the people chant ECW. Why do the wrestlers in the ring want the people to chant the name of the promotion? It used to be, go Ricky, go. Now it's ECW. Oh, great. I just fractured my fucking sacroiliac, broke my fucking leg, and shoved a fucking wooden spike up my taint. And they're not chanting Jim. They're chanting ECW. Great. It's fucking stupid. It hurt the fucking guys, it hurt the fucking business, it immuned and numbed the fans. You can't do an angle anymore, an injury angle, because they've seen these guys do everything but fucking be run through a razor blade factory. It hurt the business, it hurt our tools, the ability we had to get heat and draw. It numbed people to everything. It was fucking rotten. Closed ECW down, taking the 4 guys that I wanted to take and hope that everybody forgot about it and maybe we could go back to some semblance of sanity where guys didn't have to kill themselves and cripple themselves and shorten their careers in front of people who knew that they were cooperating with each other to do it. And when you watch these really hardcore matches, you know, The Wrestler, right? I saw a bootleg DVD because I couldn't go to the movies in Louisville because many people know who I am there. I've been on TV there for 25 fucking years. And I was embarrassed because now people look at you like, oh, you're in that wrestling, but they take staple guns and staple dollar bills to each other's heads and cut each other with razor blades? What kind of fucking morons might they be? You want to appeal to 200 guys that ain't getting laid that night, that are fucking sitting in a goddamn truck stop parking lot, or do you want to appeal to 10,000 people in a major coliseum because you're an athlete and a performer and you are doing something that most people are not good enough to do? I'm good enough to hit you in the head with a blunt instrument, and I bet you that you will bleed when I do it because I'll just hit you really hard. What talent did that fucking take? Now then, when people pay to see that, do they really feel good about themselves when they go home? If they do, then they're the same type of people that fucking molest the cat and kick the dog. I don't want to be around those people. I want to be around the people who went to see a great performance by some talented athletes and some great talkers and some interesting personalities. I don't want to be around a fucking bunch of people that applauded when a guy took a staple gun and stapled a dollar bill to some other guy's fucking head. Much less, I would rather move next door to somebody on the federal sex offender registry, than move next door to somebody in the wrestling business after seeing The Wrestler. Broken down, drug addict, has no family, and fucking slices and dices himself to pieces on the fucking weekends for chicken feed. And but there was a success story in The Wrestler. One guy opened a used car lot in Phoenix. Goddamn, what a success story. At least I got something to look forward to in my old age. Fuck, it was embarrassing. Anyway, so go ahead.
Quite a commentary on the business in that film, yeah. Well, of course,
This really is Sprite, by the way. Everybody that
all
knows
these
me
years,
will
you hadn't
testify.
gotten an endorsement from Sprite yet. You've been drinking that shit
Well-
since I watched that fucking, what was it, the barbecue or something? What is it, the
Well, you know
Smoky
what?
Mountain barbecue?
Here, Jim Hurd, God bless him, God rest his soul. I'd love to be able to say that for real, but he's not dead yet. I've got my fingers crossed. He got me on Sprite because it's caffeine free. And see, when I was spent 6 months on the WCW booking committee working with Jim Hurd, I ended up being hospitalized with a fucking stomach problem because I was so stressed that I was overproducing stomach acid, which led to the symptoms of a heart attack. And they had me hooked up to the daggum thing, and I thought I was having a heart attack. And they said, prescription strength Zantac and stay away from stress. I said, I work for Jim Hurd. I can't do that. So I quit the booking committee. Was fine from there on. No caffeine, no Jim Hurd. I'm great. I can't whip anybody anymore. I'm broke down and crippled, but I figure he's got to be fucking 90 now.
The list
I mean,
just
he's so
keeps
old. When he
growing.
was in school, he didn't have history, you know. So
How
you know.
long is that list? Your ass-kicking list? It's a long list.
No, I've shortened it up to old people, paraplegics, and midgets these days because I'm getting older and I've had too many injuries.
Have you taken anyone off the list? Has anyone graduated to maybe just general disdain instead of an ass whipping?
I still hate a lot of people. I just don't want to fight them anymore.
Okay. Like Russo hasn't graduated to something else?
No, me and Vinny Rue, we're fine now.
See,
don't try to
That's what I
stir
mean.
that.
Hasn't he graduated to a higher
Well,
plateau?
here's the thing. When we were in the WWF together, our ideas on what professional wrestling were so far apart that they actually almost went all the way around the world and met on the other side. But now, I follow that not taking it so seriously method anymore.
Alrighty.
And we speak now.
Let's take that.
Not about wrestling. We haven't gone that far, but you know.
I'm going to give you the champions right now. They'll be coming up on your screen. The World Heavyweight Champion for WCW now. This is at the time of the invasion. Here's where the titles were. Booker T won it on the last Nitro. WCW US title was also Booker T. The tag team titles were Chuck Palumbo and Sean O'Hare. The cruiserweights was Shane Helms. Now, those are the 4 belts that WWFE kept.
WWFU.
The FU. TV title was Duggan. That went by the wayside. Kidman and Mysterio were the cruiserweight tags. That went by the wayside. And Meng was the hardcore champion. That went by the wayside.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. What is that? 7 championships.
Yes,
In a company losing, so they were losing less than $10 million per championship per year, basically. I'm not knocking the talent. Here's the thing. It is amazing. WCW had 20 stars and 20 real good talents and 40 fucking schlubs on the roster. But the problem is, it wasn't the talent's fault. I know from being there in 89 and 90 that, I said at the time, if Jim Hurt had Hulk Hogan, he couldn't have drawn a house with him because they'd have figured out some way to fuck that up. Bischoff had an accidental epiphany of buying up recognized stars and doing an invasion angle, and it worked, and he didn't know how to follow it up. There's Bischoff right now knocking on the door. He's going to serve you with some kind of papers. And it's a shame because, did Turner Broadcasting suffer? Did any executives get fired for mismanaging this company so badly that in 13 years they owned it, it only turned a profit too? No. They kept making their inflated salaries, and all these fucking wrestlers were out of business. Even though they went in there and beat themselves up every night until some of them, frankly, decided it wasn't worth it and slacked off because nobody cared anyway when they did that, so why should they kill themselves? But you know what I'm saying. Let's go. Let's do it to it.
The floor is yours, Jim.
All right. Before we talk about rosters or anything, here, to me, if anybody disagrees, please, I encourage them to write, call, email, carrier pigeon, whatever. Sean here, because I don't want to hear it. No. They got to believe it. They have to believe it. If you are going to do an invasion angle, and in the days when wrestling, as we said, has been exposed and is viewed as just entertainment, or in some cases not even that, if you want to really draw big money, if you want to know why Dana White and the UFC is kicking Vince's ass on pay-per-view, it's not only because it's real, but because it's wrestling. The UFC is professional wrestling without the predetermined endings. They have the grease. Referee's got oil on him. They had that one. They had the double knockout finish where they both hit each other at the same time. They both go down. The reason why these are old, trite, cliched wrestling finishes is because they legitimately at one time did happen, or they legitimately could happen, but they've been done to death in wrestling by bookers and talent throughout the years who just couldn't come up with anything else and decided to just go with the same old shit, which happens to everybody, and it's even happened to me. But the UFC is professional wrestling with guys that aren't allowed to trash talk each other. And the crowds for the UFC, when the underdog's making a comeback, they sound like the old 70s wrestling crowds. Are you old enough to remember that?
Yes.
Yes. Were you just
No, I saw my
gleam in
first
your
match.
father's eye or a stain in your mother's panties when that, but so UFC and Dana White are kicking Vince's ass on pay-per-view because people want to see a fight between two people that they think are tough and that they are kind of interested in, either in liking or disliking. So the first thing is, if you're going to have an invasion, they have to believe it. Now, in the days of internet and exposés and etc., how do we make them believe something? Not all of it. They don't have to believe that everything's real. They just have to have a doubt, a smidgen of doubt, the suspension of disbelief. If Vince McMahon had come out on March 26, 2001, at the end of Raw, fuck Nitro, put a Mighty Mouse cartoon on that night. Actually, put on something that says turn to fucking Raw. I don't know how they would have done it, but they just showed Raw. The last half hour of the show, Vince McMahon comes out, and he says, I have finally done it. After 17 years of fighting a war with those reprobates down south. Ted Turner, billionaire Ted, I squashed you like a bug. I own it all now. Me, Vince McMahon, I own wrestling. I have purchased WCW. Boo, hiss, whatever. Because Vince, for all anything else anybody can say about him, is one of the great heels of all time on television. And in person maybe sometimes too. I own wrestling. I squashed billionaire Ted. I've purchased WCW. I've purchased their assets, purchased their name, their intellectual property, and I've purchased their wrestlers. And now that I've gotten rid of you out of my hair, Billionaire Ted, now that the WWF stands dominant as the greatest wrestling company on the face of the planet, everybody's got to be wondering what's going to happen to your favorite wrestlers. And I know that some of you WCW fans down south there, you know, because he condescended, he might well go ahead and come out with it. He hates Southern people, looks down at them, so let's go ahead and come out and say it. You're probably wondering what's going to happen to those wrestlers that you like, the wrestlers, and some of the WCW wrestlers. They're probably wondering, well, what's in my future? Well, the simple answer is, you don't have any futures, because I own you. I own you lock, stock, and barrel, and by the time because I know all of you WCW wrestlers, night in and night out, you were out there on the road, you were appearing in those VFW halls, those bingo halls, and those parking lots, county fairs, and you were trying to put me out of business. I hold you just as responsible as I do Billionaire Ted for trying to put the WWF out of business when we tried to bring entertainment to the families of the masses around the world. So, since I hold you just as responsible as I do Billionaire Ted, WCW wrestlers, I'm going to make sure you pay for that first. I own you for a year. I bought this company, I bought everybody's contracts for 1 year. And in that year, you got your choice. You could go home. You can go home. You don't have to work for me. You don't have to put up with me. You breach your contracts. If you do, you don't get paid. And what's more than that, since I basically own wrestling, you'll never work again. Or you can stick around for the next year and you can get paid on those fat, inflated contracts that those morons down in WCW signed you to and know you're not worth it. But for that money, I promise you, you're going to roll over and play dead for everybody on my roster. We will beat you like a dusty rug at spring cleaning. We will make sure that by the time that year is up, that nothing is left to your careers, that the fans would rather see Mickey Mouse than see any of you. They won't pay a dime to see you. That's going to be my revenge. That's how I'm going to get even. I've destroyed Billionaire Ted. I've purchased WCW. And now I'm going to take his entire roster down with me. You know, blah, 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 right? All of a sudden he's interrupted. Mr. McMahon, I'm so glad to hear you say that. It's Eric Bischoff walking out the entranceway. Mr. McMahon, because once again, Eric Bischoff, and that's the great thing about wrestling. When people are really pricks, you can just make them heels and they make money with it. Eric Bischoff comes out and he says, Mr. McMahon, I'm glad that you have realized what's been going on. And I'm glad that things have come to this. I'm glad that I don't have to work for that no good Turner Broadcasting anymore. And I'm so glad that you've realized that it was the wrestlers' fault all along. I tried to run a good, wholesome, honest company, but it was those wrestlers, by the whiny wrestlers, always in it for themselves. I'm glad to see blames being put in the proper place. I just want to let you know, Mr. McMahon, that I almost had you there once, but you got me, Vince, if I may. You got me, Vince, and I'll tell you, if there's anything I can do to help make this transition a little smoother, don't hesitate to call on me, Eric Bischoff. You can just call me Easy E. And by the way, I'd just like to say that if you have any spots in middle management in the WWF for someone with some experience, well, I'm certainly open to discussing those. Just on your time, Mr. McMahon, on your time. Vince looks at him whether he don't know whether to wind his ass or scratch his watch, and he's starting to think about this when all of a sudden there's a big commotion. Up about halfway in one of the breezeways, and all of a sudden the fans are screaming. Here comes, everybody knows who this is, Ric Flair, down the steps, through the people, with the WCW wrestlers. Not all, you can't have 30 guys come to, but names. I mean the people that people know. And Flair is hotter than a $2 pistol, and you can see it on his face, and he comes right down to ringside, and he goes to the announcer's desk, and he grabs a microphone, and they're taking over the area. And Vince said, no, let him speak. Because they're starting to go to break or cut to black or whatever, security coming, no, let him speak. Let's see what he's got to say for himself before he walks the freaking plank. And Flair says, Vince, and Bischoff, by the way, you and me, Bischoff. Oh, I know one of these days it's going to happen. which it did, by the way. Vince, you think you got us, don't you? Well, let me tell you something. I haven't spent 25 years in this business, this profession of mine. I haven't spilled my blood and my sweat and my tears to go out there and be the 60-minute man to entertain these people every night of my life. I had more shower time than Hogan had wrestling time. Shoot with it. And I haven't done all that just for it to come to an end like this. Yeah, you bought us. You bought our contracts, but you didn't buy our self-respect. You didn't buy our souls. And there's some guys right here that aren't just going to roll over and play dead. Now, you've got the contract. You've got the contracts. You can tell us where to go. You can tell us what time to be there. And you can tell us whether our hand goes up or our shoulders go down. That's legal. But what you can't tell us is how easy it is to get us there. You can't tell us every move to make, every foot to put in front of the other. You know, this is wrestling. What we do is not ballet. And if you want to put us in there with some of your superstars, as you call them, well, we may go down, but things may happen before we do. You know, it's a contact sport. People's eyes get busted open. People's teeth get knocked out. Sometimes a shoulder gets torn or a knee gets clipped. Sometimes people get hurt real bad. Well, are you willing to sacrifice or to risk all the money you've got tied up in all of those pampered pretty boys that you fly around and you buy limousines for while we've been busting our butts night in and night out, time in, time out, town in, town out, city to state to country, for 20 years, some of us? Are you willing to risk all that money you got tied up in your coddled little pretty boys on the thought that maybe, just maybe, it might not be as easy to get to that 3 count as you think? And what are you going to do, sue us? You going to take us to court because we beat somebody up in a professional wrestling match? Just a question, Vince. Just a question. Because you bought our contracts, but you didn't buy our souls, and we're still men. Just then, boom, comes the dynamite. No music on this, because music is, we're telling the people. Have you noticed, by the way, when somebody's getting the shit kicked out of them, somebody comes to make a save, music hits. If I'm getting a shit kicked out of me and my friend's got to wait for his fucking entrance music to come and help me out, yeah, if I need friends like that, I don't need friends, I need enemas, or whatever the fuck the saying is. Here, out of the entranceway where they should be, since they work there, comes the WWF wrestlers, led by Stone Cold Steve Austin, who looks at, now there's another roar from the crowd, and they stay on the stage. So you've got the WCW guys down on the floor around the ring, you've got Bischoff in the aisleway, you've got Vince in the ring, maybe Bischoff steps in the ring, who knows. You got the WWF guys at the entranceway, and Austin says, wait just a damn minute. First of all, Bischoff, you little weasel, I remember you, you gutless prick, you fired me over the telephone, so fuck you. Vince, what are you trying to do? You're trying to play some kind of power trip, and you're using us as your little toys? Just because you've been, for the past 20 years, you've been comparing penis sizes with Ted Turner, and now you finally figured out yours is just a little bit bigger than his is, and you've ended up with this whole thing. Now what you're going to do is you're going to put us in the ring with a bunch of guys that are going to try to hurt us, and you think we're just going to stand there wide open with smiling, with our teeth ready to be knocked out and our arms wide open, ready to be kicked in the balls? You got to be out of your mind. I don't know what you think you're trying to pull here, and I don't know what Bischoff is trying to do. And Rick Nate, I'll tell you what, I respect you. I don't respect everybody in that group of yours, but I respect you. But I'll be goddamn if any of us here in the WWF are just going to stand there and let shit like that go on. And we got families to feed. We got wives. We got kids. We got bills to pay. And we don't need to be out of work. We don't need to be hurt just because you got some kind of feud with somebody else going on. You're going to put us in a position like that. So as far as I'm concerned, Vince, if you want to fight Eric Bischoff, I'll sit down in the front row with some popcorn and watch it. But if you expect us to get in the ring with any of these pricks over here and get our asses kicked, then we're going to start kicking back and maybe even first. Now this shit's starting to fucking bubble up like a goddamn little cauldron, right? The people would believe that Vince McMahon is an executive who would make other people fight and suffer for his good. They would believe that Eric Bischoff is a weasel who wants to save himself at everybody else's expense and wants to save his job. They would believe that the WCW wrestlers who have been on the losing end of things all of a sudden now are saying, well, God damn it, we may have to do a job without coming out and actually saying that, but we don't have to do it easy. And somebody may get hurt and accidents do happen. And they would believe that then the WWF guys, who it's their home field and they own they don't own the place, but they've gotten the place over and they're on the winning side, and all of a sudden they're being expected to get in the ring with a bunch of guys that ain't going to work with them. And the only one that isn't there, and this is where we make one concession to showbiz. The only guy that isn't in the WWF group is The Undertaker. Because since it is actually the greatest gimmick in the history of the world, and nobody could ever have done this any better than Mark, the one guy that isn't there is The Undertaker, because right as Austin finishes that, and then there's Vince is starting to say something, and Eric's lip is trembling, and Flair's fucking hot and taking his tie off and throwing his jacket down, and everybody's ready to go. Boom! Blackout, lightning, big screen. It's The Undertaker. And I can't do The Undertaker's promo, but he would say something to the gist of, Vince McMahon, I know you, and I know what kind of person you are, and I know that you will make other people suffer for your own gain. Eric Bischoff, I don't know you, nor do I care to. I see two groups of people that are about to be at odds, and it don't look like there's an easy solution. And as far as I'm concerned, I'm on nobody's side, and I trust nobody. And when I get in the ring with anybody from either side or both, I'm going to make sure to protect myself at all times and do unto others before they do unto me. If anyone tries to take food away from my table, if anybody tries to take my livelihood, if anybody tries to take liberties with me, they will be dealt with from one side or the other. It makes no difference. I have no friends. May you all rest in peace. Bong! Credits, fucking rap, boom. Raw's off the air, and people are going, what the fuck is going on here? Say what you want. Those guys are mad. That's all it takes is doubt. They have to believe. Now they want to see what's going to happen next week, right? So they tune in next week. You know what happens next week? Nothing. You know why? Because Vince McMahon is so fucking shook up by shit happening that he didn't count on, that for the next 2 or 3 weeks at least, the announcement is made, ladies and gentlemen, Vince McMahon is rethinking his acquisition of WCW as far as the utilization of the talent that he has purchased, and will be having an announcement on Raw in the next couple of weeks. Don't miss an episode. We don't know when it's coming ourselves. And WWF action goes along just as it's been going along, but everybody's asking. And for once, maybe somebody in that fucking office could keep a secret and not leak shit on the internet. Because then finally, by the end of the month, the announcement is made on Monday Night Raw. Vince comes out and says, ladies, and I'm not going to go word for word of all these promos will be here fucking Friday or Christmas, but the gist becomes that it is probably not in the best interest of the wrestling profession at this point to integrate the two rosters, and therefore we have decided, since Vince has to pay all these motherfuckers now, as long as they don't breach their contracts, as long as they don't no-show or refuse to do a job or be convicted of a crime of moral turpitude or whatever, he's got to pay everybody. So now he's got all this shit going out and no way to really make any money off of it without having a mutiny or an incident. He could be civilly liable or criminal, whatever. We're going to keep them separate, ladies and gentlemen. Monday night will be Raw with the WWF roster. Thursday night will be Nitro with the WCW roster, with slight alterations for the immediate future. Now, you said, because see, remember WCW for a year and a half, the ratings had been dropping like a turd in a punch bowl. Talent had been back and forth and everything was up in the air, and Bischoff ran the place like a fucking Chinese fire drill. And the fans had run off, and the old real wrestling that the Southern people knew had gone away, and they were trying to copy Vince and everything, so you got to rehab the promotion. So now you've given the people a reason to start watching again, see what's going to happen. And then you actually do, this is the perfect opportunity, all of a sudden, all the silly skits get geared back. Because now all the talent's in a more serious frame of mind. At the same time, there's no competition. You don't need to hot shot. You're competing against yourself. You don't need to hot shot. You don't need to have an angle every 15 minutes or fearing somebody's going to switch the channel. You can start developing your talent. You can start developing the logic of your universe. WWF goes along kind of like, well, not even kind of like it was. You take out all the silliness, all the skits. If I was booking, it's what I do. You make it more of a sports-based presentation again. Instead of guys in the locker room with a camera on them and they're plotting a bank robbery, wrestlers are the worst criminals in the world. They plot illegal tactics. There's a goddamn national television camera, You have an announcer interviewing guys about their matches, or here's a newcomer, we're going to get him over. It like a sports program, because you want to be a little more serious. And over at WCW, you're doing the same thing, but also you're rehabbing WCW as a promotion in the eyes of its viewers. We're not going to drop things and leave you hanging. We're not going to switch belts willy-nilly. We're not going to have celebrities come in here and beat people for titles. We're not going to have fucking ridiculous stipulation matches. We're going to give you action and excitement with our top athletes. People are going to win and lose. And also, all the WCW wrestlers are coming out and saying, we are going to make sure this is the highest rated wrestling program on the air, that it's the most exciting wrestling program on the air, because if we can't kick their asses in the ring, we're going to kick them in the ratings. We're going to have more people watching our show than watching their show. WWF guys are saying the same thing. Fuck these fucking local yokel minor leaguers. We're still the WWF. We're the industry leader. We're going to gear it up a notch. Everybody's serious. Everybody's on their game. And you have two separate wrestling promotions, both doing the best they can to get a little credibility, to bring excitement, to get their talent positioned, to get everything that they need in order to move forward, so both programs prosper, both promotions hopefully, theoretically, succeed individually. But you want to talk about talent, or you want to talk about...
No, keep going. Where are you going? How long are you going to keep it separate?
Okay, well, see, now also, if each promotion has a monthly pay-per-view, well, then you're competing against yourself again, because you're expecting people to pay $30 or $40 twice a month to see shit that you own, so you're diluting your pie, or whatever. What kind of pie? We got peach pie, you got, smell. So you start alternating. Let's say May is the WCW pay-per-view. June is WWF King of the Ring. July is WCW. August is SummerSlam WWE. So the first thing you do... Now, bear in mind, I'm sorry, I tell a lie. Vince would also have announced on that first night, if anybody has any problem, or maybe the second week, if anybody has any problem with what I'm doing and wants to fucking jump ship, go to the other side, more power to you. Tells all his boys in the WWF. Guess who steps up and says, you know what, I don't like what you're doing, I don't like what you're saying, I want to go over there. Chris Benoit. And before we go any further, and this is totally serious, if everybody says, well, why is he talking about Chris Benoit? Chris Benoit, I considered, I wasn't close to him, but we were always friendly. He was always great to me. I knew him on and off for almost 15 years. I'm in the unique position also of, he killed somebody that I've known for 20 years and who was married to a guy that I've known for 25 years and who was not only a friend of mine, but also a teacher. So I'm going to act like that never happened, never will happen in this world, in this fantasy universe that we've got here. Chris Benoit was the same person that we always knew him to be, the greatest kid on the planet Earth, and he never went crazy, okay? Chris Benoit, back to our entertainment. Chris Benoit skips over, and Vince is hot about it. So on the first WCW pay-per-view, he decides, I'm going to send somebody over there because he can book the matches because he owns the promotions. I'm going to send somebody over there to teach Chris Benoit a lesson. And that would be William Regal. because everybody who knows enough to know what's going on knows that Chris Benoit's a tough sumbitch, and William Regal, the Snake Pit, England, the Billy Robinson fucking lineage, etc., etc., these guys are going to have it out because William Regal, his job may depend on teaching Mr. Benoit a lesson. Now what you do is I sit down as booker with both those guys and say, look, here's what we need to do. You guys, and by the way, this is a pay-in proposition. You're not getting your wrestling payoff, even if it's pay-per-view, WCW pay-per-view, who knows what it's going to do. We agree on a price, whether it's $20,000 a piece or whatever the fuck it is, because it's not like Vince is short on fucking money. He didn't start a football league that week, so he's got some extra cash laying around. Have a gentleman's agreement. No straight punches to the teeth or to the nose. You're not going for each other's balls. Nobody's going to fish hook, whatever. But you are going to have a fight and work it. Shit's going to land. And I mean, tell me neither one of these guys has done this before or would do it, especially for big money. I'm not trying to be some fucking prick here telling guys to go out and fight, and I'm saying we're making a business proposition. Will you do this? If you say no, then I'll find somebody else that's not going to, fucking affect your job, but I think they're perfect for it. They're going to get a payoff for getting out of control. And when they get in the ring first, they're going to start wrestling, and it's going to be more or less not really an MMA match because that has some rules, but it's going to be the old-fashioned fucking two guys in a gym going to settle this, which gets out of hand and somebody starts throwing a few fists, and pretty soon you got somebody who's eye busted open and they're bleeding and somebody's got a black eye, and it gets out of hand to the point where the referee fuck this calls for the bell for no apparent reason, and some other referees and maybe even security, and I'm not talking about the fucking t-shirt security couldn't keep security at goddamn kindergarten. I'm talking about real. This is a serious situation. You make it look like that these guys have gone off and they are swinging and throwing and somebody's going to get hurt, and you're pulling both of them off of each other. And this got completely out of fucking hand, and several people had to get involved and break it up. And people are shocked, and you go to the long fucking on camera because you get off of it before it's even done. It's not like they pull them apart and they go back together and pull them apart again and dwell on it, and the announcers said, oh my God, it's breaking down. No, it's like the shit happens, people hit the ring, and all of a sudden you're watching the announcer go, well, coming up later on, ladies and gentlemen, we've got the fucking end of the tag team title tournament or whatever, right? Get off of it. People are going to sit there and go, fuck, okay, now we get it. These motherfuckers, when they fucking invade each other's area, there's tempers flaring and shit's going to take place. And then Benoit goes back to WCW Nitro the next week, and his fucking eye's out to here, and he's got the fucking stitches. And Regal on Raw, whatever, and shit, okay, now, then maybe on Nitro, maybe Arn Anderson now. And see, Arn Anderson, because he can't wrestle, but Arn Anderson's not a TV commentator. I'm not saying he couldn't do it. I'm saying that's a waste of his talents as one of the great workers in the history of the business and one of the great talkers in the history of the business. He becomes a spokesman for some of the wrestlers, and potentially, and later on, Chris Benoit's personal manager. That's one thing poor Chris couldn't do, cut promo. He brings Chris Benoit and he says, look at what this has done to this man's face, this whole conflict. A bunch of promoters fighting with each other over millions of dollars, and this kid ends up the worse for it. Well, that's bullshit. Wrestlers have a code. Promoters have no code. Promoters would stab their mothers in the back and have them arrested for carrying a concealed weapon. But wrestlers have a code, a professional code. You might not like the guy you're in the ring with, but you know he's got a family to feed, he's got bills to pay, and you don't injure him, you don't hurt him to where he can't work and he can't do that. And as far as we're concerned, their side broke the code, right? And we've established that. And we're not swearing revenge because there is no rematch. Well, we going to book them again if they just had a fucking shoot? No, because it's real. So Arn explains the wrestler's code. Regal, their side broke it. But on Raw, Vince has demanded that Eric Bischoff, the general manager of WCW, and Ric Flair, who has now, over the past several weeks, come out as sort of the leader of the WCW union of wrestlers, because they now don't trust Bischoff, and they won't deal with Bischoff unless they've got Flair there to speak for he demands their presence on Raw to discuss this outrageous conduct of their WCW athlete Chris Benoit and trying to injure purposely, when of course it was the other way around. So anyway, Bischoff as the general manager of WCW and Flair as the representative of the wrestlers have been called to Raw by Vince McMahon to answer the charges about this horrible situation that's going on where Regal and Benoit got out of control, and Benoit, WCW's representative, obviously was being unprofessional, so they're there and they're going to air this out in the ring because Vince is hot and wants to. And Flair comes out and says, he immediately knows that Vince is trying to make him look bad, but the people that saw it know what happened, and he's not gonna put up for anybody chastising any of his wrestlers because he was defending himself, and basically, we start getting a little creative here, but we still have to keep people believing that this could actually happen. So Vince says, okay, well, I'll tell you what, Flair, since you're here, I don't know whether Mr. Bischoff informed you. No, he didn't inform me of what. Well, then you're wrestling tonight on Raw. Okay, yeah, we've picked up a new talent. We want to test him out against an old pro and see what he's got. Because the timing of this is just about right. I can't remember if this guy was signed then or if he came in maybe a couple months later to OVW. But the point is, I believe he was in OVW at the time, so he would have been able to be pulled to Raw. So anyway, he tells Flair. Flair said, well, I didn't bring my gear. Well, it doesn't matter. Find some tennis shoes, some sweatpants. It doesn't matter because by the time I get finished with your career, that's all you're going to be able to afford anyway, Rick. But you're going to be wrestling tonight against a guy. I think he's going to be probably our next big thing. His name's Brock Lesnar. He's the 2000 NCAA heavyweight wrestling champion, and he's got an agent that really doesn't like you very much. His name's Heyman. I think he said you fired him once, maybe twice, back in WCW a few years ago, because Flair did fire Paulie at least once. I was there for one of them, if not more. They book Flair against an NCAA champion shooter who is barely trained in professional wrestling. So we know with a guy that's advising him that's a noted fucking liar and hates him. So when the match comes about and Flair's got to do it, it's supposed to be a professional wrestling match, but what's going to happen? He can't breach his contract, otherwise he'll go home. We're taking a few liberties here. Mm-hmm. They start the match. Flair goes to lock up. Brock's standing there with his arms at his sides. Flair goes to lock up again. Brock double legs him, takes him down. Flair grabs the ropes real quick. Referee backs it up. Flair comes up and chops Brock. Brock just looks at him. Chops him again, just looks at him, goes to take the arm. Brock just jerks it away. Okay, he's not cooperating. We know where this is going. So Flair, being an old pro, and also because he can throw a hell of a fucking working punch and lay it in if he needs to, hauls off and blisters Brock right now. Brock's in the UFC right now. And they paid him $250,000 a year to learn how to wrestle, so let's once again say that we're making it worth his while, take a couple of shots from Flair. And Flair throws it and blisters him right in the fucking eye, and Brock immediately takes him down. Now you've got a 25-year-old monster who's just come out of the NCAA tournament against, no matter what kind of shape that Rick was in, and no matter what kind of athlete he was, twice as old, a lot smaller, and not prepared for competition at that particular point. And Brock's taking him down, and Flair now is becoming the dirtiest player in the game, and he's going for the eyes, and he's going for the ears, and it's getting a little ugly. But it doesn't last long because Brock, like he did with Frank Mir, gets on him, a couple of hammer fists, and locks some kind of chicken wing or something, and he's stretching Flair's, and everybody knows Flair's had a bad shoulder. Had rotator cuff problems, blah, blah, blah. He locks that fucking thing on, and he's cranking and going south with it, and Heyman is screaming, red in the face, like he'd get. Rip it out. And Vince is standing back there grinning. And basically Flair screams, and then finally Brock lets go, and Flair's fucked. He's ripped his shoulder out. And that's the way that segment ended, and Brock has been introduced. And he won't be a big deal in the WWF for a while because we just needed a noted shooter to come in and do that. Mm-hmm. And he's going to go to developmental, but he's going to be back and he'll be undefeated. But see, here's the thing. Here's another thing. With these rosters, while at the same time WWF is doing their program and WCW is doing their program, try to be the best wrestling program, on those programs, I'm featuring the young talent, the Edges and Christians, and the Kurt Angle had only been up there a couple of years at that point, so technically he'd be a young talent. And we'll talk about the roster here in a second. But a lot of these guys underneath that are not stars, that had not been identified with one promotion or another as of yet, because this was 8 years ago, but I need young talent. I'm going to be featuring them underneath in their own promotion. But for the sake of the crossovers, stars, shooters or tough guys, and whipping boys. That's what I need to cross over because we need to keep it believable. So now that has happened, guess what happens? Jim Ross, like Ed Whalen in Calgary, gets up and walks off in protest. This is the most unprofessional thing I've ever seen in my life. I'm not going to have a part of it. And he walks off the fucking broadcast. And Vince says, that's fine. I know where your sympathies lie. I know where your fucking heart is. You want to be back down there down south with your wrestlers. Well, Jim Ross, I own you too. So go ahead. Go on back to WCW. I'll get a real broadcaster. Michael Cole, he's done the news. Think Vince can make that believable. He's been trying to get rid of JR for 10 fucking years, even though he's the best there's ever been. Guess who else walks off? Mick Foley. Because Mick Foley, the one thing that people know, he genuinely is the nicest guy in the wrestling business. And he doesn't like what's happening, and he decides that he is going to, because he saved his money, everybody knows that too, he's going to quit. He's going to retire. He walks off from the promotion and retires from wrestling. And I base this on after Vince screwed Brett, Survivor Series 97, who didn't come to TV the next day besides Owen and people in the family, Bulldog? Mick Foley did not come to TV because he was upset that he, truth in Cactus, if you see this, you were upset that a wrestler couldn't trust a promoter. When you think about it in hindsight. But they nominated me to call Cactus and talk him into coming back because we had a good relationship, and I did. I called him at night, and the way I got him back was I said, look, this guy just got screwed. He got screwed in a job where he's making $2 million a year, so he can go down somewhere else and make $3 million a year. And you're not going to come back to TV to protest this screwing. Is he going to write you a check for your annual salary out of that $3 million he's getting? If not, Cactus, come back for you. And he did. He's, you're right. Well, I don't even know if he said I was right, but he came back. So Mick Foley walks off and quits. And henceforth, and forthwith, all the interpromotional matches are now being billed as code suspended, which means the professional code amongst wrestlers is not in effect when a WWF guy faces a WCW guy. Just so we got that straight. So the June pay-per-view, the King of the Ring. Now who do we want to humiliate? Vince has decided, you know what, there's an old war horse that has fucked me around. He no-showed me Survivor Series 93. He was supposed to be one of the knights. He went home to nurse a sick horse. He no-showed me a couple. Terry Funk is on that WCW roster. So I'm going to give Terry Funk a championship match on King of the Ring against Kane, the Intercontinental Champion. If Kane won the Intercontinental Champion, he put it on him the previous Monday night because we just want Terry Funk in there with this giant, unforgiving, ugly monster so he can go whip up on the old cowboy. Well, Funk, being the veteran that he is, Kane gets in there once again. There's a lack of cooperation, and sometimes these are short because sometimes a shoot is a stinky match in a lot of cases. When people aren't cooperating, it's not a good match. But they're kind of working with each other, you can tell, but Kane is just blistering him. And you can see welts coming up on Terry, and he's really fucking pounding him, and Terry's fighting back. He ain't giving him any opposition. So Terry, being the old veteran, he had two things thought of. One is a way to get out of fucking the building when he does what he's thinking of, and secondly is the way to fucking make sure that he can't be fucking let go or fired or whatever, at least in storyline. We'll try to suspend the disbelief. As Kane is beating the piss out of him and bends over to pick him up to beat him up some more, Terry small packages him and cinches up long enough to get a fucking 3 count from the referee. He's going, oh, fuck. He fucking double crosses him and wins the Intercontinental title and immediately rolls out of the ring, grabs the belt, and out of the crowd comes the Harris boys, Ron and Don Harris. And they grab Terry and they run out the side fucking door. and Kane's up looking like fucking Wendy Richter when Moolah cinched up on her. And Terry Funk has now captured the WWF Intercontinental Championship, and Vince is having a fucking epileptic fit. So, God damn it, July, WCW pay-per-view. Well, guess who Vince decides to send to take care of this shit? Guy that ain't gonna get double-crossed, Kurt Angle. Okay, beat an Olympic champion, motherfucker. Kurt comes out and says, basically, Vince McMahon has sent me here to issue an open challenge. Any badass motherfucker in that locker room that wants to come get in the ring with me, stick your head up your ass. I'll put a sandwich on your back and starve you to death. I'm an Olympic gold medalist, and that was only 3 years ago, and that ain't no bullshit, and I'm here to fucking stretch somebody from asshole to appetite. Guess who steps up? Rick Steiner. Rick Steiner, the dog-faced gremlin. Great athlete in fucking college, amateur, wasn't an Olympic champion, wasn't even close, and we'll tell you that, but he's a bad motherfucker, and he's got hands like fucking paws, catcher's mitts. So Steiner accepts, but they have basically a fucking wrestling match, a stiff, strong style, much like that Kurt had with Samoa Joe. Strong style, but with no ropes and business. And Steiner gets pinned. He loses, but then Angle maybe spits on him or whatever. Steiner, motherfucker, as a man, Steiner slaps him. Well, then all of a sudden, who do I have down here? Guess who hits from the crowd, from the WWF side? Perry Saturn and Dean Malenko. And they get Rick Steiner down, and they're fucking football kicking him. And once again, we're taking some liberties, but I've seen Steiner hit himself harder than I'd want anybody to hit anybody else. So guess who fucking runs out? Scott Steiner, because it's a WCW pay-per-view. So, I mean, when they hit the ring, it's like Mark's hitting the ring and the boy's got to come from the back. So they're getting some fucking kicks in. Scott Steiner comes down with a baseball bat or a board or whatever, and once again, now the WWF guys take off and run, and there's fucking cops chasing them or whatever. I'm glossing over a lot of this, but we make these incidents look, somewhat legitimate, and at the same time, there's a little, but still, it's a whole lot more real than what the fuck they're seeing with the fucking diva pillow fights. By the way, I'm making that a fucking firing offense as Booker for anybody to suggest a diva lingerie pillow fight match to me. So anyway, we reveal on Raw, Vince comes out, says, well, doesn't look like Rick Steiner is going to be wrestling very much. I'm paying him, but he's probably, losing in on the deal because of the hospital bills. So I'd just like to thank the man that made it all possible to get my men into the building that night, to get my revenge for Terry Funk stealing my promotion's Intercontinental title. He brings out Bischoff. Eric, you have earned your stripes. You're officially now my assistant here in the WWF. Everybody, fucking turncoat, traitor, backstabbing, bastard prick. Now Eric Bischoff is Vince's assistant, and since Ric Flair has been home injured with his shoulder torn out and will never wrestle again, hey, Crip Flair, you like the WCW folks so much, why don't you go down there with that fucking droop-faced fucking Jim Ross and the goddamn rest of the fucking clowns? You can be the general manager and you can watch the whole boat sink because we're fucking with all of you. Now Ric Flair's the general manager. Bischoff is the stooge of Vince McMahon over on Raw. And now shit's heating up, and at WWE SummerSlam, Vince says, okay, Rick Steiner, you're not hurt bad enough. You're going to be back up in about a month or so. So tell you what, how about you bring your brother Scott, you big badass shooters, take on Saturn and Malenko, see what happens. Well, that match comes about, and fucking basically double disqualification. There's no finish because nobody will do business with each other. Mm-hmm. And once again, they have a strong style fucking match, and they're fucking throwing some blows. But this time it's a little bit more wrestling because all those guys are wrestlers instead of fighters, and Malenko knows his shit, and look at Saturn. And the people see a match that they can believe, and nobody will do business. There's not even any 2 counts. There's people trying to pin people and people getting out of it. So it's a double DQ, and it's waved off. And meanwhile, and also I forgot, also, when Flair is made hears that he's been made the general manager on Nitro, he comes out and says, so Eric Bischoff, did he go ahead and go the whole route and give you 30 pieces of silver, you Judas motherfucker? We all knew you'd stab us in the back, you prick. But now you do it right on the other guy's fucking television. So, heat, right? And maybe as a matter of fact, also on pay-per-view, Dustin Rhodes for WCW gets brought over and gets put in the ring with the Big Show. And the Big Show, what the fuck you gonna do with the guy he doesn't want done? Big Show beats Dustin. Maybe Dean Malenko stretches poor Canyon. Because Canyon's just a guy on the card trying to keep his job. He gets put in with Dean Malenko. Malenko stretches him. Right? Some shit like that.
Okay.
Maybe this doesn't all happen in this order, but so Flair's promoted Judas Bischoff, but on Nitro, he announces he has a surprise later on since he's the new general manager at Nitro. And also, Dusty can do a hot promo about Dustin, his son, being abused, saying the WWE doesn't make legends, they just make ass kissers. Right? And then Flair at the end of the program comes out and introduces his new acquisition. Because it occurred to him, if he's the general manager, he can hire wrestlers. Even though Vince doesn't have to pay him, he's hired this guy out of his own pocket to come to WCW because he feels like it would be a morale booster. Guy named Cactus Jack. Vince's head on Raw blows up. The guy walked out. He quit. He retired. You can't sign Mick Foley. I didn't sign Mick Foley. I signed Cactus Jack. And I'm paying him, Vince. You're not. And we just fucking shit, right? Maybe in September, WCW, Dusty becomes Dustin's manager. And maybe puts him together with Jeff Jarrett as a tag team because there's 2 second-generation wrestlers. Because now also, I'm going to want to build my young talent. Because as we're getting ever closer to WrestleMania, a lot of this shit's going to be blown off. Now, I will say one thing. I didn't pick up 3 people. And specifically, and I'll explain this. I didn't pick up Goldberg because he had one of those contracts where he's going to get paid no matter what. He was closing in on 40. He was injured at the time. I questioned his dedication to the business, to be quite honest. He was smashed over as a phenomenon, but he never was allowed to become a polished worker. I don't think his heart was in it. He had other things to do, so I didn't take Goldberg. I didn't take Lex Luger because despite it, this is fantasy, but some things you can't go that far, and Vince McMahon would have not taken Lex Luger, and for the same reason Larry Zbyszko, because Zbyszko fucking sued him, and there's been heat for 20 years, so we didn't take those people. But I'm building my younger guys, so maybe Funk has been ordered on that pay-per-view to defend the Intercontinental title that he stole. That he stole. Jeez, I'm trying to read and talk at the same time. That he stole against Malenko. But son of a gun, he calls in and says, damn this thing, I got a sick horse again. And he doesn't show up. Well, now, a no-show, he can be fired, right? Then Vince will never get his fucking belt back. Now it's more important to Vince to have Terry Funk, that old broken-down cowboy, that has been a thorn in his side as NWA champion since the fucking late 60s, and his old man and his fucking brother, the Funks, the NWA, those Southern wrestlers. I'm going to get this motherfucker on a fucking program. I'm going to humiliate him in front of everybody, and somebody's getting my belt back, right? So Terry doesn't get fired. Booker T maybe has a match against Christian, but he's disqualified. Booker, WCW, Christian, WWE, because the referee brought in happens to work for the WWE. Wouldn't you know who won the pony? And also maybe Jeff Jarrett and Dustin Rhodes as partners there with Dusty in the corner because they're second-generation stars. Maybe they had a match and beat the Hardys. And there was cooperation there. They had a hell of a match. Because the fucking Hardy Boys, they have no fucking bone to pick, but they're WWF guys, so now they're in hot water for putting the other guys over without Vince coming out and saying as such. Okay, maybe we go to October. Now, on the WWE program, the Dudleys have become the WWE Tag Team Champions. Meanwhile, to teach Balls Mahoney a lesson, because there's 4 guys we picked up from ECW. Jerry Lynn and Nova. Jerry Lynn, tremendous performer. Nova came to me in Louisville right about this time. He was in great shape and doing some great stuff. Balls Mahoney, tough, crazy subbitch. I've always had a soft spot for him. Good worker. He's injuries and etc. and that style, but 8 years ago he could still fucking go, and you want a tough, crazy sumbitch that'll hardway himself. And Rob Van Dam. Rob's work, be honest, psychology-wise, not exactly stellar, and some of it's sloppy, but he does athletic things that nobody else can do, and he's got charisma, so he's a star. So maybe on that, we bring Brock Lesnar back to the mainstream, and he hardways and hospitalizes Balls Maloney. Balls Mahoney. Terry Funk is forced to defend the Intercontinental title against Eddie Guerrero. God damn it, we're getting this belt. And wouldn't you know who won the pony? Funk's laying there in the middle of the fucking ring, and Eddie goes to do the frog splash, and his foot slips off the rope, and he falls. And you know Eddie was such a worker. He could do this. He actually falls on his head and knocks himself out. And fucking Terry looks over. 1, 2, 3. He's still got the fucking belt. But we're playing with Terry's shit because he can get by with it. Mm-hmm. Everybody else is pretty much deadly serious. At Survivor Series, we're starting to get heated up because now guess who we got in the ring against each other? Bam Bam Bigelow against Taz. Now, have you noticed these are not the Hulk Hogans, the Stings, the etc. Because no, we're not. They're on their own program. Well, Hogan not, but you know, Sting's on his own program. Undertaker, Austin is on his own program. Whatever, but Vince is not going to risk his top guys coming over and getting in this fucking bullshit. But by the same token, every week on TV, not only are both promotions doing their own angles and their own cards and building their own pay-per-views, but everybody, not everybody, but selected people each week are sniping at each other. Because Dusty now is going to, cut some fucking promos here shortly about some people, and he can cut right down to the bone. So Bam Bam Bigelow and Taz gets out of hand, and maybe the cops have to hit the ring, and not the fucking cops, they police, but real uniformed cops with fucking guns and tasers and shit that looks legitimate, and they handcuff somebody, but in the process of dragging these people out, with Bigelow and Taz once again talking about, especially Bam Bam, somebody will throw some. Fuck, he was a bounty hunter, and goddamn, he had his head tattooed, for fuck's sake. You think he gives a shit? Some fan would get fucking hurt and there'd be a lawsuit, and Vince goes fucking epileptic. So Vince fires Taz, and he's gone. And of course, you pay him to go home, not taking it out on the guy for an angle. But now nobody sees Taz anymore, and he's legitimately fired for this. So that there's fucking shit going on. He'll come back after this whole thing resolves. Vince books a handicap match: the Dudleys against Animal the Road Warrior. Because now, and the Dudleys can come out and rubbing their hands together because Hawk didn't work there at that time. And the Dudleys can be rubbing their hands together. Gosh, we wish we could have got both of them because we'd have loved to beat the Road Warriors because they're legend of the tag team titles and they're building to the 20 times. But we'll take Animal, and they fucking beat Animal, and Animal doesn't want to, and he tries to get his shots in, but at the same time you can tell, it didn't devolve into a shoot, but it was humiliating for the guy, right? Triple H, who's been hurt all year. And by the way, here's what I think about Triple H. His promos, I'd rather watch a dog lick its balls. Boring and way too long. One time I had Raw on and he's talking, and then I fucking go out to the garage, I get something, I come back, he's talking, then he gets in the ring to wrestle. Okay, so I go make myself a fucking sandwich, I come back, he's talking after he finished the fucking match. Good worker, student of the game, but he's the guy that works with the guy that draws the money. Would Triple H, unless he had married into the family and been smashed into that spot year after year after year, with the interruptions for the injuries, with the bland promos, would he have ever been in that spot if he was just the other? Even he's a good worker, but he ain't Shawn Michaels as far as show stealer. He ain't Steve Austin as far as, or The Rock as far as fucking megastar. He ain't Mick Foley as far as talent. He doesn't get. Does Triple H get mentioned in with those guys? Flair, Foley, Taker, Austin, Rock, except in WWF scripted fucking television commercials? No. He's the guy that works with the guy that draws the money. But Triple H returns, and Funk is forced to defend the Intercontinental title against Triple H, and Triple H wins with some type of help. We won't go into details, but some nefariousness from Eric Bischoff. And then Vince doesn't fire him. Now that I got my belt back, I'm not going to fire you. I want you to show up next month because I got a Christmas present for you on the pay-per-view, you fucking old cowboy prick. So anyway, blah, 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 blah. Where the fuck are we going with this? So December comes around. See, I did think about this a little bit. On the December pay-per-view for WCW, Mick Foley, and see, this is not all, this is just some highlights. Because, I mean, if we really sat down for days and weeks, but Foley wins the WCW title, so he's the WCW champion. Terry Funk beats somebody, wins a match, but all of a sudden, there's a blackout. See, we can play with Terry stuff a little bit, a little showbiz. There's a blackout. When the lights come on, Undertaker has Terry Funk up in a tombstone, and fucking tombstones him in the middle of the ring, crosses his arms, rest in peace. And on the screen, Vince pops up and laughs, I still pay both the TV crews, because how else are you going to have a fucking blackout and all that, yeah, right? He got even for Funk's double cross. Now we're starting to get a little bit better quality matches. Sting, WCW guy, beats Chris Jericho in a whale of a match. But once again, how did fucking Jericho get beat when wasn't the fucking fix in? Well, goddamn, the answer is fucking Jericho hurt his fucking back. When Sting put the fucking hold on that he was supposed to, Jericho couldn't complete things as necessary and had to give up because maybe Sting just wouldn't go over quite as easy, right? Playing on the fucking Bret Hart Survivor Series, da-da-da. Animal on that pay-per-view brings out a special guest. He has talked a friend of his into coming back to the company and agreeing to tag team with him, thanks to Mr. Ric Flair, general manager. Hawk, the Road Warriors are back. They're back together. The Warriors that night win the WCW tag team title because Vince doesn't give a fuck what WCW guys do against each other. January at the Royal Rumble, guess who comes back? Hulk Hogan. Big fucking reaction because he's heard all the things that Dusty Rhodes has been saying and Ric Flair has been saying. Dusty Rhodes and Ric Flair were always pretenders, brother. I was always the man. They were out there in the small time, the Bush League, but Hulkamania will never die because Hulkamania, the shit that he would do, right? He was the man. Steve Austin at the Royal Rumble wins the WWE title. He says he's the real world champion. The Rock beats Jeff Jarrett. Match never happened, right? Did that match ever take place?
I don't know. It didn't.
So The Rock has a whale of a match with Jeff Jarrett. Of course, Jeff's a WCW guy, so he's ordered to lay down for him, whether he would have or not. And Rock cuts a promo about, I hear there's this guy, and I can't do The Rock, so, you know, but he promos Sting, the guy that beats his chest and howls, and he does a bunch of his pie jokes and the face paint and everything, and he basically just verbally embarrasses Sting. Undertaker is having a match. Guess what happens? In the middle of the fucking match, the fucking apron flips up, and Terry Funk comes out from under the ring with a flaming fucking branding iron and sticks it on the Undertaker's ass and runs. Right? And maybe not his ass. That might be funny for Taker, because we can't get too funny with Taker. Right. But he basically flaming brands the Undertaker and fucking takes off. And that's obviously going into business for himself. And I mean, some of this, as we think about some of this stuff, it might be a little funny for a shoot, so we might take it out. But, you know, blah, blah, blah. The Dudleys are undefeated in WWE Tag Team competition and for the past almost 4 months. And also we have an interpromotional match booked that gets everybody's attention. They don't even break loose into a fight. They really try to beat each other in a wrestling match and can't for 20 minutes. Nobody wins. 20-minute Broadway, Kurt Angle, Chris Benoit. They would fucking scorch the place, right? Strong style the whole way. February pay-per-view WCW. Dusty promos Hogan. Challenges him. Says, basically Dusty was... One time Dusty and Flair on TBS. We were coming up to the first Crockett Cup in the Superdome. And they actually this was 1986 when there was no breaking of kayfabe. And there was no internet and people didn't know these terms. You know, I said how I never even heard the term high spot until I got in. Right. They actually came out on TBS and said they don't do jobs in front of 70,000 people. Because I think Flair said, I ain't doing a job in front of 70,000 people in the Superdome, brother. And then Dusty said, well, I don't do no jobs in front of 70,000 people either. So where does that leave us?
Really?
Yes. And the boys were even like, fuck. And of course the people who knew said fuck. And the people who didn't know what job was, it went by them. Right. But it went... So Dusty goes into business for himself on this pay-per-view when they put a live mic in front of him, which he, he's the dream. He does these type of things because he's used to calling the shots. And Dusty cuts a promo on fucking Hogan saying, I was the man when you were still fucking strumming a guitar, and I was against superstar Billy Graham in Madison Square Garden, brother, and blah, blah, blah. And just out of nowhere, just says these things, running fucking Hogan down because of the fucking remarks that Hogan made the previous month. Sting maybe has a match with Edge and something happens, but Sting answers Rock. Foley defeats his WCW challenger, and he responds to Austin saying that he was the man, the world champion, by saying, hey, I've held the WWE title and the WCW title. Steve Austin, you've only held one, and Mick can carry this off. All the top guys are now getting a little snotty with each other. You've got Rock and Sting and Dusty and Hogan and Flair and all these and Austin, if I mention him, basically insulting each other on each other's television programs because they're fucking sniping and this thing's going on for so long. And maybe Terry Funk gets ambushed by two guys under fucking hoods, but instead of this deal where the camera just happened to be in the parking lot, it's the old deal. We did this with the Thrill Seekers and the Heavenly Bodies in Knoxville. A fan has a video camera, and you make it a woman because you hear the woman's voice, because if it's a guy, you think either is somebody with it or maybe he should have helped. But there's the woman with the video camera and the cute little 6-year-old girl. Oh, there's Terry Funk, honey, run and get his autograph. And you shoot, hey, wave, and there's Terry, doing the wave with the little girl, and all of a sudden these two guys pull up in a fucking car and jump out, boom, into the fucking side of the fucking car, kicking, beating, boom, jump, screech. The woman's going, oh my God, call the police. And they show on the WCW program, they show that footage because Flair's talking about, was it The Undertaker because he got the hooded druids, right, or was it Vince McMahon? Who's responsible? But more importantly than that, this is how far it's fucking come. So finally you go to Raw. Vince is tired of the fucking headaches, the lawsuits, the medical bills. WCW and Flair, put up or shut up. God damn it, it's time. My roster makes a challenge to your roster. Interpromotional showdown. WrestleMania. Up and down the card. WWF versus WCW. And whoever wins the majority of those matches where the codes will be suspended. Whoever wins the majority of the matches will be the roster, the crew that gets their contracts renewed. So whoever wins the majority continues employment. Whoever wins the minority, you're all wiped out because it's been a year and now I have the clause. See, those WCW guys have been wanting to get in. They could say, hey, if enough of your guys get hurt, you'll have to use us. We'll still be employed. And we're talking hundreds of thousands of 7-figure jobs here. Mm-hmm. So this is big shit on the line. So now by this point, we've had work, we've had shoot, we've had work shoot, we've had fucking people who can really talk about each other and make people believe it, fucking promoting each other. Meanwhile, we've had the WWF and WCW independently with their own television shows and their own fucking live house show tours. We didn't even talk about that.
Right, that's true.
Their own promotions. Wrestling should be hot. The ratings should be good. The WCW should be rehabbed. It's been a year. All the talent has been positioned the way you would want it. I've probably had Vince spend a ton of money in developmental to sign the guys that are going to carry us in 5 and 10 years. I've got my guys on the roster that are young, already bubbling underneath, ready to use them after WrestleMania to give people a brand new look. Because after WrestleMania, it's all WWE. Mm-hmm. Even if he keeps the WCW fucking roster, it's all WWE because we can't keep this going forever.
Right, sure.
So basically it comes down to this giant WrestleMania fucking card, and whichever promotion wins the majority of the fucking matches is the ones whose contracts are renewed, and they're the fucking horses he's riding.
Right.
Now he can keep anybody he wants from the other, from the losing side if he wants, but if WCW loses, he's fucking canning them all because they're a bunch of fucking pricks. Maybe on Nitro, maybe you have both rosters out for a contract signing and maybe a fucking, one of those work shoot press conferences. Maybe not. I don't know. But WrestleMania 2002, you want to hear this card?
Let's do
And these matches, to my knowledge, either had never taken place, have never taken place, never took place up until then, or whatever the case. Bob Evans sausage gravy for the third time. And WWF is on the left side, WCW is on the right side. You might have to make two columns because we got a 5-hour pay-per-view window, folks, because fuck, I'm just going to put them all down and see what happens. For the undisputed World Heavyweight Championship, there will be only one, Stone Cold Steve Austin versus Mick Foley. Now that match had happened, but it never happened with both titles on the line with two guys in opposite fucking places. And also the thing is, Mick was about ready to retire. So I think that's as good a way as any to send him out. The main event at WrestleMania where he finally loses the championship to Austin and he rides off into the sunset to be a best-selling author. And as Buddy Rogers said to a nicer guy, it couldn't happen. Because I love me some Mick Foley. Okay. The semi-final match, and see, there's not stipulations in these matches because you're gimmicking gimmicks. If you put, okay, you know, I mean, we'll have a couple of things, but for the most part, it's not going to be First Blood or Texas Death or Lights Out because the matches themselves are gimmicks. You don't want to burn through your fucking gimmicks. The last ride of the old cowboy, Desperado, Undertaker, Terry Funk. Tell me that Undertaker would not figure it an honor to work with Terry Funk, and Terry at that point probably was going to retire for the 42nd time. But did that match ever take place? Anybody?
Taker and Funk?
Two guys from Texas, even though Taker doesn't, he's from Death Valley, but Taker would have a ball with it. Funk would be on his game. What a fucking match. And you know, and the basically, Taker would fucking, he would win the match, but he would then come out as a babyface because he would beat Terry until Terry couldn't hardly fucking breathe. And Terry wouldn't quit until finally he was about dead. And then Undertaker would get respect for Terry Funk.
Okay.
The Rock versus Sting. WCW icon and fucking WWE icon, whatever the fuck, never happened, never will now. And in that one, and where's my fucking results? There we go. Sting catches Rock. Because we're going to assume that everybody's here to do business, and Rock at that time, wasn't that the year he worked with Hogan, or was that 2003? It was this year? Was that the last match he had? No. Which one? When was the last match he had? But the point is that he was fixing.
He came back and did it.
Okay, but I mean, at this time he was fixing. Defying the cardinal rule of television, folks. I'm talking to people off screen, but Rock was leaving. He already was going to the movies. I think he would have given back to the business. And he would have put Sting over because Sting was going to stay at that point for a little while. Mm-hmm. And, you know, Rock's going to make $15 million a year in the movies, so I think his feelings would be fine. And here's where we're going to play with this a little bit. When Hulk Hogan came back, he had a manager with him, Jimmy Hart. So, since the two biggest icons of these companies of the 70s and 80s are going to go head up, it only figures they both need somebody in the corner. Hulk Hogan with Jimmy Hart against Dusty Rhodes with Jim Cornette. Like, Dusty needs somebody to talk for him. No, I wouldn't open my mouth. I just want to fuck around with Jimmy Hart and watch this fucking match. So, and since we're just pulling this all completely out of our asses anyway. And in that one, if I'm not mistaken, Hogan wins on disqualification because of what the managers do. Because Dusty ain't laying down. He ain't going to do no jobs in front of 70,000 people, so where does that leave us? So it's a DQ, and I don't blame you.
Who gets it?
Hogan over Dusty on DQ. Oh, yeah. See, now you put the circle around the wrong fucking deal. Hogan over... Wait, you think Hogan's going to lose under any circumstance? This may be a fantasy, but we got to keep some fucking semblance of reality. Next match. This match had happened, and actually, I thought it was fucking great. Vince McMahon versus Ric Flair. But for once we got a stipulation. If Flair wins, he gets 5 minutes alone with Eric Bischoff. We've been building this for a fucking year, right? Ric Flair, his career was over. He has not wrestled since right after the fucking purchase when Brock tore him up. But he says, God damn it, not as a wrestler, but as a man, Vince McMahon, I'm going to kick your ass. And that little fucking weasel, that little gutless bastard, that no good prick, that Judas turncoat, Eric Bischoff, if I beat you, Vince McMahon, I get 5 minutes with Eric Bischoff. And Vince says, well, of course, because Vince is the genetic jackhammer and has balls the size of grapefruits. He's not going to fucking get beat up by a fucking cripple, so blah, blah, blah. Sure, you can have it. And there's Bischoff. I did think about it the other way around, but I saw Bischoff try to wrestle once, and it was so fucking embarrassing. He was, oh my God, his shit didn't land, and he looked fucking awkward and horrible. And so Flair and Vince had a great fucking match, and then, you know, basically Bischoff could do whatever the fuck he could do. It won't last long. Oh, and I'm sorry, and by the way, Flair does defeat Vince McMahon to get to 5 minutes with Bischoff. Undisputed World Tag Team Championship. This would have been the first time that this match of past and present ever took place. Dudleys against the Road Warriors. And in that one, the Warriors would go over, and I think that the Dudleys would be honored to do that, especially if they knew they were getting a rematch and there was more to the story later on. Then we're going to showcase probably the strongest wrestling match that we can field out of both rosters in an Iron Man match. Don't know what the time limit is, but you know, most falls in whatever time that we could give them on this 5-hour window we have. Kurt Angle versus Chris Benoit with Arn Anderson. And Benoit would catch Angle. And I don't think anybody that likes wrestling, I don't think would argue with having seen that, you know, probably every show for the next month, or for the next year rather, but on this one, Benoit tops him. The Intercontinental versus the U.S. title. There will be only one after this, Triple H versus Booker T. And Triple H does catch him because, of course, once again, it's fantasy. But
I wonder why.
Somebody, you know what? I was doing my Who's Slamming Who call in. And I didn't watch WrestleMania. I was washing my hair. And Tommy Fierro says, are you surprised that Triple H won? And I blew snot. I busted out laughing. I said, surprised is not a fucking emotion I would have. No, I'm not surprised he won. Wouldn't be surprised if he won, if he beat the whole fucking roster. Okay, then we're going to gimmick things up a little bit. We're going to have a ladder match just because this is the blow-away high spot match of the fucking show. Edge and Christian, who I thought were a tremendous tag team. I loved the Brood. I loved their team. This was about the time they were doing the good stuff. God, you got rotten handwriting.
Yeah.
And by the way, their manager is Trish Stratus. Another blonde Canadian. She looked hot, and especially since with all this seriousness going on, by the way, the Diva of Lingerie pillow fight matches are out of it. Trish was a good worker. She really worked hard. At that time, she wasn't necessarily fabulous, but she got that way. But we've put the girls' matches on the back burner unless we can find something either to match up to a Gail Kim and an Awesome Kong in terms of a fight, or the Crush Girls from Japan, or Chigusa, or something like that. You know, we're not really featuring Major Guns or whatever against, you know, Stacy Keibler or whatever the fuck that was. They're going against Nova and Jerry Lynn, who are probably going to be my WCW high spot barn burner tag team. Here you go. Tough guys match. Big Show and Kane against the Steiner brothers.
Who gets the full?
Oh, I'm sorry. That would be, let me keep track of this, Edge and Christian.
All right. Give me that next one again.
Show and Kane and the Steiner brothers. See, we got 16 matches on this show because we've been spending a year selling this. We're going to give you your fucking money's worth. Pack a lunch, bring you fucking popcorn. Bring the kids, the midgets are wrestling tonight. Or bring the midgets, the kids are wrestling tonight. And in that one, the Steiners catch it because they're, after all, brothers, and they're a little bit more experienced in tag team, even though Big Show and Kane put up a hell of a fight. I like this next one. Chris Jericho versus Lance Storm. I brought them into this world, I'll take them out. The Thrill Seekers. Jericho catches Storm in what would have to be, I would think, another blowaway fucking athletic performance. The Hardys with Lita. And Lita would stay with the Hardys because they were a package. They really, I think they were, the three of them were hotter together than when they've tried to break them up and fucking one guy killed the other guy's dog and all this happy horse shit. Against the WWF resident young people's team against my second generation team of Jeff Jarrett and Dustin Rhodes. I don't know whether Jeff will like being teamed up with Dustin, but like I said, in a lot of these cases, these underneath matches, these are my young people that once we get, because we ain't going to have Terry Funk, we ain't going to have Mick Foley, we ain't going to have The Rock, we ain't going to have Hulk Hogan. I'm using this 1 year build period to have these dream matches, have a blowaway WrestleMania, but all these other people are featured because they've been featured on my program, and then all the younger guys are going to move up, and by the next year's WrestleMania, this side of the card is going to be over here.
Right. Because
age and attrition and injuries. Look, the Road Warriors ain't going to go long. Vince ain't a wrestler. Flair is not, well, Flair's still going to go a while, but we wouldn't have thought at the time. Dusty was winding it down. Hogan part-time. Rock part-time. Sting still okay. Funk is quitting. Taker still has years. Austin actually was, unfortunately soon to be done, and Mick wasn't going to wrestle full-time after that. So these guys are going to be the future as in next year. And that's another thing. And I would have pumped money in developmental because when these guys are over here,
need someone there.
Developmental guys are going to be over there. Or we can just keep using the same fucking people until everything happens like, the AWA and we all turn into powder. Okay, what about this 6-man? Well, you need a bigger board.
Yeah, I'm
just do it on the screen, whatever.
Good.
Eddie Guerrero, Perry Saturn, and Dean Malenko.
Okay.
Against Chavo Guerrero, Rey Mysterio, and Chris Candido with Tammy Sitch. You tell me that 6-man tag, we're going to have some lucha spots, we're going to have some wrestling, we're going to have some fucking big bumps.
Candido, give me him again.
Candido, Chavo, and Mysterio. Who are, once again, everybody knows I love Chris Candido, I can't even say that. Rey Mysterio, an amazing performer, the Guerreros, the whole family. Oh, and I'm sorry, results. Jarrett and Dustin caught the Hardys on that one. Because we got to keep this thing fucking fairly close down to the wire, so we're starting to trade back and forth. In the 6-man, it's the Eddie Guerrero-led team. So the WWF wins that one. And we got 3 more. Brock Lesnar, the next big thing, with his manager, Happy Heyman. Defeats Bam Bam Bigelow. Can you imagine that big fucking beast in there with fucking Brock and they're suplexing each other back and forth? Be believable. and as a matter of fact, god damn. I hope he never sees this because Kevin Nash will come up and put his foot up my ass because I put him this low on the card. Rhino versus Kevin Nash, and Nash takes it. And having said this, I had a match before I even looked at the rosters in mind that was going to be over here, probably third down, which was Michaels and Triple H against Hall and Nash. And I look at the rosters. Hall was not in WCW, and Michaels had taken his ball and gone home, selling his back, and was not in WWF. So that match would have been the Legends deal, except we don't have half the participants.
Right.
And, and once I guess we could have made it up, but, I was trying to stick to somewhat,
reality, that's fine.
Oh, yeah, stick to reality. Yeah, there you go. We're really sticking to reality. Jesus Christ, give me some more of that black tar heroin over here. And then, just because we want to follow the annual WrestleMania tradition and get everybody on the card, you don't have to write these names. But 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. A 14-man battle royal, and I'll just read them off. You can graphikize them. Steve Blackman. Reason I picked keeping Steve was because he was a legitimate martial arts expert, looked in great shape, had that serious look. He's somebody you would want to have for this trading back and forth of real fights. D'Lo Brown, who never got a fair shake up there and was much better talent than his fucking push indicated. Al Snow, who knows a lot about wrestling and wrestling holds and would have been training some of the younger guys. Val Venus, who was a great fucking performer. Bull Buchanan, who never got a fucking chance, just incredible, who was a great young kid. William Regal, who we've already talked about. Bill DeMott, talk about a big bad son of a gun that was convincing and could move around. Balls, Van Dam. Dallas Page, just because, God bless him, I couldn't find anything to figure out. He didn't... The WCW roster was kind of off as far as the WWE at the time, had a lot more young guys that could fucking move, quite frankly, and I was trying to figure out where to place several of these guys, and they just didn't have any obvious counterpart on the other side, because we talked about that Diamond Dallas Page against the Undertaker scenario they did. Holy fuck.
That's,
and who's going to believe that? He's stalking his wife, and here's Diamond Dallas Page been a baby face over here, and all of a sudden he's a fucking nut and a sex pervert. Maybe a sex pervert, but he certainly wasn't a fucking heel. I'm kidding, Page, if you see that. Canyon and the Harris twins, and once again, Page was on getting ready to quit. He made his money, and he was older than anybody gave him credit for being. Great shape, but I don't want to invest in some guys who are rich and about ready to get out of the business when I'm building my future. And in that battle royal, Van Dam wins because he's somebody that I want to fucking invest in. So what? Just WCW Battle Royal. Battle Royal. So basically, for the WWF side, Austin over Foley, Taker over Funk, Hogan over Dusty DQ, Triple H over Booker, Edge and Christian over Nova and Jerry Lynn, Jericho over Storm, the six-man WWF wins, Brock over Bigelow, WCW wins Sting over Rock, Flair over Vince, Warriors over Dudleys, Benoit over Angle, Steiner's over Show and Kane, Jarrett and Dustin over the Hardys, Nash over Rhino, and Van Dam wins the Battle Royal. Now, wouldn't you know who won the pony once? And by the way, do you know what I'm saying when I say that?
Won the pony?
Wouldn't you know who won the pony? The promoter in Richmond, Virginia's name back in the maybe late 50s, 60s was Bill Lewis. And Richmond, Virginia was on its ass. So they announced, because Bill Lewis owned a horse farm, he's going to raffle off a pony. Come to the matches, come down, buy your ticket, put your ticket stub in the box, and we're going to draw at intermission, and somebody's going to win a pony. We're giving away a free pony. And they have a great house that night, and he comes out at intermission, he's going to give away the pony, and he reaches down in the box, he fumbles around, and he pulls it out. Well, wouldn't you know who won the pony? My son Blue won the pony. And everybody, you motherfucker, and they killed a fucking town. Anyway, so every time that I'm trying to call shenanigans on something that is obviously fucking contrived or couldn't fucking take place, well, wouldn't you know who won the pony? Anyway, if you will notice, by your arithmetic, 16 matches, 8 and 8. Well, son of a bitch, on Raw the very next night, Vince comes out and crows, a tie is just like kissing Dusty. It ain't no good to anybody. Because you see, the deal was, I said, the promotion that wins the majority of the matches is safe from being canned. As you can see, 50% is not a majority. That means WCW roster, you're done. You're fired. You're vapor. History in the archives. Finished, kaput, over with. Get out of my fucking building. But out comes Ric Flair. Says, you weren't very good at math in school, were you, Vince? For a billionaire, or at least on paper, you can't count very well. Because you see, it's true, the results of all the matches that you gave, but you forgot one thing. When I beat you, I got 5 minutes with Eric Bischoff, and I beat Eric Bischoff in quick fashion. That counts as a match. Because of you, Vince McMahon, WCW won the majority of the matches. Now you can't fire us. You're stuck with us. Oh, Vince's head blows up and everything goes to fucking WWE, but now we've got 2 programs, Monday and Thursday, with 2 separate crews. Everybody you want to keep gets integrated, and now Vince and Ric Flair in the brand new revamped WWE are at each other's throats as Flair moves out of the ring and into the position of a general manager. So instead of, I'm not going to say anything bad about Vicky Guerrero, I don't know the lady, but instead of some of the other general managers that they've had, you've got Ric Flair as one general manager. You've got fucking, if Bischoff, if we want to do that or whatever the fuck. So you've still got really fucking experienced heavy talkers in those positions. But, and, you know, Flair says, we do have to be a part of the WWE. I'm going to make your life hell, Vince. And Vince has turned red, and here we go off again. And we, after a year, we've rehabbed WCW enough to hopefully do 2 million buys. Because fuck, you know, Jesus Christ. And at the same time, we've got the ratings, hopefully as peaked on Monday and Thursday as they're going to be. Hopefully we've had a tremendous run of house shows, but now the house shows were always separate. Because we don't want to fuck with that, because if you do it too much, you know, then it just every show. But you've got your dream matches out of the way, you've positioned your younger talent, you've got money in developmental, you've got ratings on Monday and Thursday, hopefully peaked. You've drawn your big buy rate, and now you've got your next year planned with all of these guys that are now going to be challenging for these fucking titles that the legend like Steve Austin can now be working with fucking Kurt Angle or Chris Benoit, who have proven themselves, or fucking Triple H and Booker. You've got Edge and Christian now, who can come over here and fucking zap the fucking Dudleys if they want, or you've got the fucking Nova and Jerry Lynn that can come down and work with the Hardys, but they can be in the fucking bigger matches. So you've got Warriors and Steiners to reprise as a Legends match. You get your belts off the Warriors because that's a short-time thing. Probably put it to the Dudleys, and they work with Edge and Christian. Nova and Jerry Lynn are going to do some good shit. Jeff Jarrett and Dustin Rhodes a good fucking team. Or maybe Jeff splits off on his own and chases that Intercontinental title. Undertaker is still a fucking resident locker room enforcer, but he's got a bunch of young kids. Brock Lesnar is coming along. Hopefully Brock won't go fucking insane and figure just because he's getting paid $1 million a year it's a bother to leave home 4 days a week. Fuck.
I remember back in the day in Crockett when you used to have to leave the home only 4 days a week.
Jesus Christ. Well, in this book, Jim Cornette, Midnight Express 25th Anniversary, it actually, hold on, I will find real quickly just one example. If I may just flip, I'm just going to vamp for a second. I believe it was about this time here. We asked for the time off. I want to tell you what
available at JimCornette.com.
Available at JimCornette.com. Oh golly, when was it?
For the low price of
only $25 plus $5 shipping and handling, and it is a heavy book. You can testify to the weight of the book.
Worth every penny.
Yes, October 16th, 1984. We had been working since July in a stretch of 103 days. The Midnight Express had 7 days off, and since I was also doing TV promos and managing Dr. Death at the time, had no days off. 103 days in a row, double shots most Sundays. Anybody that now in the business that doesn't mind or minds working 4 days a week can kiss my big fat ass. But anyway, so you basically fuck. I don't know if that would have worked. Obviously, there would have been politics come into play, and we're just jacking off, fantasizing here. But by the same token, that would have been a lot fucking better than what they did with what they had. I'm sorry.
How hard was that, Vince?
I had 3 days. I had three nights to think about it. I drove 700 miles yesterday and then sat down for a couple hours and fiddled. But, once again, it's we can put shit down on a board here, and there's so much politics, and people would get hurt, and people wouldn't want to do what you wanted them to do, and personal issues would come into play, and this would never actually happen. However, having said that, the concept could have happened. And you might not go as far with it as what we did by just hauling things out of thin air, but the concept could have happened. Or they could have made an attempt at it. Or they could have spent the money up front to get the stars, to have the dream matches What would that video? If we just had those matches right there, how many videos would that sell? How many pay-per-views would that sell? How long would people talk about that? But it would have required putting another promotion on the same level as the WWF, and that's what has been the problem. And that was the same thing, to be quite honest, when Jim Crockett bought Bill Watts' territory. The guys were not presented at the same level, and I was not. I didn't have enough seniority in the business at the time to have been privy to what talks went on, but I never did understand it because there should have been some money made there somewhere. But it was not botched on anywhere near a level as this deal was.
One time in history.
And by the way, and here's the thing: who the fuck is Kwee-Wee? What is Kwee-Wee? Anybody? Listen to these names that they fucking signed. I don't want to embarrass anybody, but they signed everybody they could get for a fucking ham sandwich and a cup of coffee, and they left the guys that would sell the tickets sitting home, buy them out. I mean, less than 3 years later, he was paying several guys 7 figures a year. Why not fucking do it there?
Yeah.
Anyway.
You get one shot in history to have the.
And now let's go down and just count the number of people that are still active, even for a 1 or 2 shot thing in the wrestling business. Steve Austin's not going to work again. Terry Funk pretty well means it this time. Rock, there's 3. Hogan probably 4. I don't think Dusty's wrestled again. 5. Flair said he's going to honor it. 6. Vince ain't having another match. Well, let's say 6 still, because you never know with Vince.
That's true. God
bless Hawk. 7. Animal doesn't work. Does Animal work anymore? Maybe it's 8. God bless Eddie. 9. Nobody knows where Saturn is. 10. Dean's retired. Bad neck. 11. Chris. 12. Bam Bam. 13. Benoit, 14.
Brock, too.
Brock, well, yeah, what am I thinking about? Brock. Where was I at? 14, 15. Let's see. Trish, 16. 16 fucking people off that card from 8 years ago are no longer in the business in some respect or another, so it ain't gonna happen. And half of this side is done.
Lita and Storm too.
And Lita.
Storm.
Devin Storm.
But not Devin Storm, Lance Storm.
Oh, Lance Storm.
Devin Storm.
In the big
Storm's
angle.
I like Devin Storm too. But anyway, yeah, so the point is, it ain't gonna happen now. And dream matches are few and far between. I don't mean to keep harping on it, and I will let you say something, but those matches aren't going to happen anymore. And what dream match now is there possible in the business that has not taken place that could?
Today,
right now.
Everybody's met.
Because they all work well now. Thank God for TNA. Here's one thing. I almost thought about not picking Jeff Jarrett up at all on the roster, because if he had continued on, he would not have founded TNA, and right now Vince would own the entire fucking wrestling business, and then he'd already be down in Mexico fucking their business up, and over in Japan fucking their. Oh, I forgot he is. But anyway, so I almost thought about saying, fuck no, I'm not going to pick up Jeff, because then there'd be no TNA. But in a fantasy world, why not?
Sure.
But everybody's met. Everybody works for mostly the same person. The people that have the seniority for dream matches have already either met and then retired, or there ain't no Andre and Hulk Hogan anymore.
Right.
There's no WrestleMania 3 main event. We created some there, but that was the window they had, and they blew it. That's all I'm going to say about that.
That's all he's going to say.
That's it. That's all.
Because I don't want to get long-winded or anything.
I want to thank you for the amount of work you put into this. First
Are you kidding? It took me probably a grand total of about 4 hours. I used to put 8 hours to 10 hours two days in a row into my Ohio Valley Wrestling TV, and that wasn't even on pay-per-view.
I appreciate it.
It was on WBKI 7 in fucking Louisville.
I appreciate every minute of the 4 hours. And
I had fun. I haven't booked anything in a while. I went to Bookers Anonymous. It's a 12-step program. You have to answer every wrestling-related question with "I don't give a shit." 200 hours of Smoky Mountain TV in every house show for 4 years. 300 weekly episodes of Ohio Valley Wrestling in every house show for 6 years. The WCW booking committee for 6 months dealing with Herd. 2 years on Vince's creative team for I went up there. I said, "Well, Bruce Pritchard, me and Bruce." I said, "What do we do? Come on over to the house. We're going to work." I get to Bruce's house, right? We spent the whole morning playing with his dog. We'd throw the stick, the dog would run, get it, come back. Then we went to the pizza place down the street from his house for fucking lunch. Then we'd come back and we watched fucking Phil Donahue or Oprah Winfrey or some shit. I said, "Why are we not writing TV?" He said, "Well, we can't do anything until Vince tells us to do it, or if we know he likes it. Elsewise, we're just wasting our time." I said, "And why are we sitting here at your fucking house?" "Well, because the office may call, and then it looks like we're working." I said, "Well, why can't we sit at my fucking house?" He said, "Because I got seniority over you, and I'm your boss." I said, "All right." So every day I'd sit at fucking Bruce's house, and on Wednesday we would go to Vince's house where we'd sit there at his dining room table and actually write the show. And then the rest of the week we'd sit over at Bruce's house. And then JJ quit, and they put Bruce in the office. Here's the deal. I go to Stamford. I move into an apartment in Stamford that they're renting for me until I can find a house, right? It's in Stamford. Bruce lives 30 miles out in Trumbull. Mm-hmm. So every morning I go out 30 miles to Bruce's house, sit there, play with his dog, eat the pizza, and fucking come back. This goes on for 3 months. Well, fuck it. When I finally found a house, I found a house right out in Monroe, Trumbull. I'm like 5 miles from Bruce, right? I move in. 3 weeks later, JJ quits and leaves. They put Bruce in the office. Now every morning I